Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching third and final part of What If Naruto Left the Village with Executioner Blade. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto entered the camp with an odd apprehension. While Kisame was reading a book about sharks and Itachi was sitting looking at piles of stuff, Naruto felt a sinister presence in the air. Tamari wandered curiously over to Itachi, seemingly unaware of the atmosphere, asking, "What did you win at gambling? Anything good?" The Uchiha sighed. "I now own a mansion on the north end of town, a summer house by the sea, a company that builds shingles, a horse named Tabasco, the patent of an invention that slices bagels, a candy store, and some guy's wife. That's only the stuff worth big bucks, the rest is in boxes that I need to sort through." "A man bet his wife?" Tamari asked, sitting next to him and looking over his shoulder. "Yeah. Actually, it was the same guy who I got the horse from, and he bet his wife before he would bet his horse." "You started with almost nothing, so how do you manage that kind of profit?" "I just play card games, which I can win at easily." "Isn't that cheating? How is having better eyesight and a better memory than everyone else cheating?" "I guess it's not, but it still doesn't seem right. I figure morality is beside the point, since Itachi, you have no use for anything you've won," Naruto said, collapsing onto his sleeping bag. "Maybe so, but I can sell some of them for money, and return the others in exchange for having some powerful people owe me favors." "This probably goes without saying, but I assume you are going to return the man's wife," Tamari said, prodding Itachi's head. "Bah. I bet there are some groups who would pay handsomely to have her as a hostage, use her to blackmail her husband," Kisame said, looking up from his book. "I sometimes can't believe you people," Tamari said with her arms crossed. He was joking. "Tamari. Do you really think we'd go to all the trouble of trying to transport and sell a person when we could just sell off that summer cottage?" Naruto asked, looking up languidly from his couch. "Okay, I think you're missing the point, but it really doesn't matter. Speaking of junk, it looks like you got quite a haul yourself, Kisame," Naruto said, not really paying attention because his thoughts had already shifted to other, more apparent sources of interest. "This is not junk. I used to have the greatest known collection of Jaws memorabilia in the world, but I was forced to leave it all behind in Hidden Mist." "You must really like the movie." Kisame changed the Jaws hat. "It's my favorite. I'm always inspired when I see it to strive for great things, just like the hero in the movie, except that it's so sad when he dies at the end." "Thanks for ruining the ending," Tamari sighed. "Don't worry, Tamari. Kisame has a rather unique view of Jaws, which I should know since he's dragged me to see it at least 7 times, Itachi said, taking a bobble head of a well-known actor from his box of stuff and tossing it over his shoulder into his trash pile. Kisame appeared offended. "Hey, it's a great inspirational movie, and I think every young boy and girl should be taken to see it. A shark, wanting simply to find something to fill his starved belly, and the merciless humans who hunt him. You'll laugh, cry and be moved by the poor shark's struggle to live." With wide eyes, Tamari said, "Okay then." While Itachi was still going through the box, a stuffed monkey flew through the air and ended up in the trash pile. "So anyway, enough about us. What have you two been up to all evening?" Itachi asked. Tamari was wary, feeling that he sounded a little arrogant, saying, "Not much, went to a movie and ate some sushi." "That's it? Sounds pretty boring. Are you sure you're not leaving anything out?" "Of course. Why are you acting so suspicious? What do you think I'm not telling you? You're forgetting to mention your make-out session in the forest, if it was even as tame as that," Itachi said matter-of-factly. "And just to be clear, you two are free to do whatever you want as long as Kisame and I aren't around, since we really don't want to listen," Itachi added in the same tone of voice. "I didn't know we needed your permission," Tamari scowled. "Ah, they grow up so fast, don't they, Itachi?" Kisame said with a sly smile and a fictitious tear in his eye. "Do you really want me to kick your ass that badly, Kisame?" Naruto asked, growing irritated despite having been in a great mood only moments before. "Ha, I'd like to see you try, brat. Come on, these nutcrackers aren't going to let up anytime soon, so we'll sleep somewhere else tonight," Tamari said, tossing her sleeping bag over her shoulder as the two swordsmen were getting ready. Naruto had the idea to grab his sword and pack on the way, but he didn't really care and just let himself be led into the woods. Not even a minute had passed when Kisame became aware of a problem and called out to them, "Hey guys, you only have one sleeping bag." "That's all we'll need," said Tamari, her voice echoing from the trees with a hint of amusement. "Well, she's rather feisty, isn't she?" Kisame whistled softly as the Akatsuki exchanged glances. Surprisingly, yes. We were, in a word, owned. I'm not sure it was quite that bad. Itachi looked at him blankly. Well, maybe it was that bad, but we can at least claim a moral victory. No, Kisame, we can't. Our bluff was called, and plans of harassment were foiled. Bah. All they've done is temporarily delayed our mocking, since they have to come back in the morning. Not only that, they've given us a whole night to improve our strategy. True, Itachi said after a brief pause, and it would be a waste not to use it if they want to give us extra time. With rapt anticipation, Naruto surveyed his position. Even though Tamari was aware of her vulnerability, she would be powerless to stop him. Hardly able to retrain himself, he moved in for the kill. Your precious bishop is mine. Check, bastard. Naruto's chessboard was now in the middle of the sleeping bag, which had been completely unzipped and spread out on the ground like a picnic blanket. Are you ready to concede yet? I have checkmate in 2 moves? I need time to think. That, Naruto pointedly replied, was what you said about your last move, and yet after 5 minutes of thinking you moved exactly where I knew you would and brought me 1 move closer to checkmate. So now again you are going to think, and 4 or so minutes from now, you are going to make what we both know is the only move you can, and thus I will be 1 move from checkmate, so you should just give up. You should just shut up, Tamari said, gritting her teeth. So I take it I'm going to be the one who's sleeping on the ground? Asked Naruto, who nearly began to whistle the Jeopardy theme but decided that might be pushing it. Well yeah, what kind of man would you be if you made a girl sleep on cold hard dirt? Despite rolling his eyes, Naruto held back from saying anything more insulting. Slowly, Tamari came to terms with the fact that Naruto had been correct. I'm going to get you next time, was the only thing she could say. Sure you are, Naruto chuckled. Naruto slowly sat up and slipped over to where his sword was resting against a tree late that night, when the only sound in the darkness was Tamari's breathing. As quietly as he could, he raised the weapon and moved away. He kept moving for a while, making sure to keep at least 4 miles away from anyone else because he was more worried about the chakra he would emit than the noise he would make. With his mind slowly slipping into itself, he sat on the ground, placed Sakura in front of him, and ran his hands over the blade. You there, stupid fox? About time, I've been waiting for hours? Stop whining, you're getting an amazing opportunity, so you have no right to complain. Kyuubi restrained his urge to spit out insults, conceding the point. Anyway, revealed Naruto abruptly, what's this jutsu called? What is it with you humans and naming things? This particular technique could never have had a name since you invented it, but you could call it giggity giggity gig, no jutsu, and it wouldn't make the slightest difference in how it worked. Although Naruto had never given it much thought, he assumed the fox was right. He shrugged and pulled himself back into reality. He then bit his thumb and made a line of blood across the flat of his blade, creating the well-known hand seals in a novel way. Giggity giggity gig no jutsu. A brief burst of chakra, a hint of smoke, and the jutsu was finished. Kick-ass, Kyuubi said, slowly opening his eyes and looking down at his hands with a great deal of trepidation. A young man who was now performing backflips for the sheer joy of being able to did so stood in place of Naruto's well-known sword. In contrast, Naruto experienced an odd sense of fulfillment and asked, so how does it feel to have a body again? Well, it is a human body, and so completely inferior to the noble body of a fox, but I suppose I'll manage. Despite his arrogance, the demon was betrayed by the way he seemed to enjoy constantly stretching and flexing his muscles. Now I'm hoping you will remember the time limit. Yeah, brat. I'll be back tomorrow mid-morning. And remember, Naruto said, you may have a body, but the same rules as always apply. If you break even one, I'll know and you may find yourself quickly being cut off from the chakra that keeps you transformed. Yes, father. Speaking of which, how real am I? Technically, the body you're inhabiting is a variation on the henge, but reinforced with chakra. You are for all intents and purposes human for the next 12 hours, but I'd avoid rough physical contact. After guessing what Kyuubi had in mind, Naruto followed closely as the demon abruptly ran away. Hey, I look pretty good. The babes are going to be all over me, the fox said, bending over to examine his reflection as he arrived at a lake. Naruto thought to himself, one more thing. You've helped me out today, and so I'm going to allow a little mayhem, but only a little. An insignia on the back of his shirt caught Kyuubi's attention, and he exclaimed, wait a second, you made me look like Uchiha Sasuke. With a, yes I did, statement, Naruto began to return to the campsite. Tamari and Naruto both slept in, quite late the following morning, so Sakura was back beside Naruto. The sword, which had been playing around River City as Uchiha Sasuke only hours before, was not sighing. Unbeknownst to Uchiha, every city guard had been given a picture of Sasuke, Kyuubi, and instructed to bring him to the central tower if he was ever seen, where he would face charges of mischief and public disturbance. Unfortunately, Naruto was not in the vicinity to witness the ensuing chaos when Uchiha Sasuke finally made it to River City a few years later, but that is a different matter. When Tamari and Naruto staggered back into the main camp, they saw that Itachi and Kisame were conspicuously absent. But Tamari picked up and looked at a stack of a few scrolls and a Polaroid picture. Although the pattern looked familiar, the cloaks worn by Itachi and Kisame in the photo weren't the same as the ones they used to wear in Akatsuki. The caption read, "Since he won't be needing it anymore," and it struck a chord. "Oi, Naruto, get over here. You won't believe what those two whack jobs did with your sleeping bag. Considering what I've got here, I would believe anything," was the first few lines that Naruto was reading while holding one of the previously piled scrolls. "It appears that your sleeping bag has been made into clothing, though how the two of them managed to pull it off in one night is beyond me." "Well," Naruto replied, "count me as even more amazed because this scroll is, and I quote, the Uchiha and Hoshigaki complete annotated encyclopedia of everything two hormonal-charged teenagers might do while alone in the forest with just a large sword in Naruto's pack. Creepy. What's really creepy is that they knew exactly what was in my pack. And I mean exactly, down to every last used gum wrapper. Apparently one wasn't enough, because here's TUAHCAEOETHCTMDWAITFWJALSANP Volume 2, and I'd bet that's Volume 3 on the ground there," Tamari said, grabbing one of the other scrolls. "They managed to fill 3 scrolls. They must be a lot more creative than we are, since all we really did was play chess and sleep. So they managed to sew 2 cloaks from a sleeping bag and come up with and write 3 scrolls worth of ideas which I suspect are mostly sick, twisted, or both, all in one night." Naruto glanced at the image. No one takes stupid jokes more seriously than Kisame and Itachi. They're probably not here because they wanted to get some sleep somewhere we wouldn't find them. "Well, I'm going to find them, and they'll be damn sorry when I do," Tamari said, smashing the Polaroid in her hand. "Well, you have to at least give them credit for sheer effort," she said, pacing back and forth in rage as Naruto read the first scroll with a good deal of amusement. "Okay, so maybe you don't," the boy said, tilting his head to the side as a kunai whizzed by his ear. Itachi and Kisame, the two Akatsuki, walked into camp that night with bundles of money, declaring that they had sold some of Itachi's acquired capital and given back the remainder, but Tamari never did discover where they were sleeping. The sand girl had nearly calmed down after spending the day exploring with Naruto while he purchased a new sleeping bag. She even permitted herself to read a few entries of TUAHCAEOETHCTMDWAITFWJALSANP, which, although she would never acknowledge it, were at least mildly humorous. "So, what are people's views on going to see this Vincent person?" Itachi asked early on Monday morning, taking out the business card Mako had given him a few days earlier. "I think we should go for it. I figure there's no harm in asking for payment when the job is already done," Tamari said, leaning against a tree. "So then," Kisame responded, "what do we do if he refuses? Are we ready to threaten him, and if so, are we willing to go through with any threat we might make?" "You did the job, so it's your call," Itachi said, turning to face Naruto. He kept tapping the hilt of his sword. "I agree that we have very little to lose by trying, assuming we're discreet, and a few subtle threats might be required. On the other hand, I want to avoid violence, so if push comes to shove, we back off. Sound good?" After receiving a largely positive response, Naruto nodded to himself and said, "But then comes the problem of who should go." Kisame smiled and said, "All of us, are you sane?" Itachi asked sternly, suggesting that you, a registered missing nin of this country, could walk into the central tower of this city unchallenged. "Yes, I am. On what basis? You'll all just have to find out. You're not messing with us, right? We're not going to walk up to the central tower only to be surrounded by members of the city guard?" Tamari asked, prodding the fire's coals to make sure they were all out. "Well, subtlety will be required, but once we're in the tower, there won't be a problem. However, this doesn't mean we won't need to prepare a little bit." Itachi joined the Akatsuki almost immediately after leaving his village, and so has never really dealt with clients personally, meaning I have to explain to you people how to prepare for and handle a meeting with the poobah. "And what makes you an authority?" roared Naruto. Kisame said, "All right, let's try to guess how old I am," with a frustrated expression. Curious, Itachi examined his longtime partner closely before realizing that he was unaware of the shark man's age, 26. Unknowingly, Tamari shrugged and said, 23. I'll go with Itachi on this one, 20.6, Naruto said, tapping the hilt of his sword. I'm glad I look so youthful, but I'm afraid to say I've been walking this earth for a full 30 years, Kisame said, laughing after staring at them indifferently for a few seconds. Naruto's mouth was hanging open, and Itachi's would have been as well, had he permitted himself such emotional outbursts. The only one who appeared to be impressed rather than surprised was Tamari. So, as I'm 11 years older than even Itachi, making my time as a shinobi almost twice his, I've had much more variety in my experiences. One of those experiences is that I have, on many occasions, met with high and done jobs for high officials. Any more arguments? No? Good. The four of them left for the city after Kisame and Naruto quickly covered up their more strange features with hand seals. They were perfectly integrated into this city, so none of them worried about carrying heavy weapons. Tamari was thrilled to discover that Kisame had taken them to a shopping center. Alright, Kisame said with authority, we are not going to visit the Poobah as Nukanen, but as contractors and businesspeople, meaning we need to dress sharply. Does anyone have any ideas or? As Kisame remembered that Naruto only wore a navy vest and black pants, while Itachi always wore a black shirt and black pants, a sinister suspicion suddenly burst into his mind. We might have a problem here. As soon as Kabuto and Sasuke reached their Mark's estate, they understood why the Akatsuki had been chosen for this mission. There were dogs everywhere, and the estate was teeming with guards. They're sniffing the guards to make sure no one is an imposter using henge, Sasuke surmised after observing their movements. Kabuto raised his eyebrows. Those dogs can't have been easy to train. That kind of expense paid suggests our Mark is expecting assassins. There must be 20, 30, 40, more than 40 genjutsu traps. We step on the wrong blade of grass and alarms are going to go off while we try to get out of whatever genjutsu it is, Sasuke said, nearly falling from the tree as he activated his Sharingan. He then released his Sharingan and rubbed his head, saying, there's so much it's disrupting my vision. So we're rethinking the chop the guard on the neck and take his place approach? Rethinking. We're trashing it. This mission is going to require much more deviousness, which is probably why they gave it to my brother. And of course, now you're going to give it your all just to prove you can do anything Itachi can. Damn straight, smirked Sasuke. Since kimonos made Itachi appear too feminine and made Naruto and Kisame appear strange, it was decided unanimously by those whose votes counted Kisame and Tamari to wear suits. Tamari was told she would have to dress similarly for consistency's sake, but she also secretly liked Western suits over kimonos. After appearing confused by the black suits they were given, Itachi and Naruto finally emerged to inquire about the location of the shuriken holsters. A lengthy and intricate explanation of what a suit was, how to wear it, and why it lacked shuriken holsters came next. Then, while Kisame went shopping for sunglasses and every woman in the area slammed Itachi, Tamari pulled Naruto away to get his hair cut. When Naruto returned 15 minutes later, feeling rejuvenated, he found Itachi at his breaking point, surrounded by girls of all ages who were staring, drooling, and or groping him. Naruto made frantic motions indicating that Itachi should quickly flee to the men's restroom, which was only 50 feet away, because he was afraid that Itachi would grab a kunai and be stabbed at any moment. Yo Naruto! What happened to Itachi? Kisame exclaimed as he triumphantly emerged a few minutes later, carrying several small boxes. As he was speaking, Itachi bounded out of the restroom like a savage and arrived at the safety of Kisame and Naruto in less than 3 seconds. The girls began to assemble as soon as he showed up, but the rather intimidating men brandishing big swords kept them back. The three of them wandered aimlessly around the mall after Kisame and Naruto escorted Itachi back to the store to change back into his normal clothes, figuring Tamari might be a while shopping for herself. Naruto eventually grew bored enough to begin speculating about whether suffocation or blood loss would be the first causes of death if someone swallowed a kunai. He assumed suffocation and was just beginning to think about putting this theory to the test when Tamari showed up with a variety of bags and an utterly joyful expression. Naruto looked at him. Nice of you to hurry, since we weren't waiting or anything. Oh, shut up. I'm in far too good a mood to be annoyed by you. So then can we at least go now? We've been here for over 3 hours. Tamari hurried to follow Naruto, Kisame, and Itachi after realizing that they had already started to leave. Yes, we can, though I may go back and look more if you keep whining. Later that same day. It's not fair, is it? Kisame and Tamari sat together as the four made last minute preparations, while the other two fumbled to move in their unfamiliar clothing. She concurred, saying, "No, it's not. I mean, between the two of them they don't have as much fashion sense as a bowl of cottage cheese. But once they actually get dressed up." Tamari was thinking, Naruto looks amazing, and Itachi could pass as a friggin' model. Makes me want to go become a nudist. Everyone is equal that way. All movement within 30 feet stopped instantly after this remark. The wind ceased to blow, bees ceased to buzz, and birds ceased to chirp. "I was being sarcastic, you know," Kisame said, looking around blankly after a moment of realizing that everything had quieted down. Each tried in vain to get rid of the mental image, but the damage had already been done. "Let us never speak of this again," Tamari said with a violent shake of her head. "All right, then. I was just kidding," Kisame coughed. "Please make your jokes out of earshot next time," Itachi said, massaging his temples as though he had a headache. "Some people have no sense of humor. Some people have no sense of decency," snorted Naruto in amused derision. "Well, some people are just stupid. Hey, I don't need to take that from a guy who looks like he belongs in an aquarium." Huh? This coming from someone most suited for a zoo cage? Tamari gathered up her own purchases and headed to one of the many lakes in the area as the two began what she suspected would be a lengthy tirade of insults. The idea of having something other than her shinobi uniform thrilled her, even though she had never been a big fashionista. Fortunately for Tamari, she had underestimated how long Kisame and Naruto could continue their pointless argument, because not only were they still fighting when she returned, but they also seemed to be getting close to the moment when swords would be picked up and landscapes destroyed. She dressed quickly so as not to keep the others waiting. She stepped in and said, "All right, quit it, Kisame, weren't you just telling us a few hours ago how experienced you are? Shouldn't you then also have an equal amount of maturity to go with your experience?" Assuming that the two of them should have moved past it by now and were likely just looking for a reason to pick up the aforementioned swords so they could destroy the aforementioned landscapes. After giving that idea some thought, Kisame said, "Well, yes, I should, but that doesn't mean I do." Peeved, "And you're supposed to be our role model?" When he saw her, Kisame stopped his attempt at a clever rejoinder. "Well now," he said in surprise, "and all this time I just assumed your hair was stuck in those 4 spiky ponytail things." Tamari was blushing. "Don't be stupid, I just do it that way so my hair never bothers me." Upon receiving a reprimand, Kisame pouted a little before beaming once more and saying, "Hey, we have to do our thing." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as though prompted by a silent maestro, the three of them reached into their breast pockets, took out their sunglasses, flicked their wrists to open them, and slid them on in perfect unison. Tamari started giggling. After standing in awe, Kisame and Naruto both swore and gave Itachi some cash, which the Uchiha smugly took. Tamari had to calm down for a few minutes, and in that time she nearly passed out from laughter. When she finally regained her composure, she observed Naruto's angry demeanor and said, "I apologize, but you guys look like a bunch of dysfunctional yakuza." "It's not personal," Naruto sighed. "We all made a bet on how you would respond. Kisame figured you'd think it was cool, I figured you'd roll your eyes and brush us off, and Itachi said you'd laugh. The two losers had to pay the winner 5,000 yen each. So now that you three are done being silly, can we get onto the important stuff?" With a sorrowful sigh for his 5,000 yen, "All right then, a couple things that the more unstable of us have to remember. It's true that we could crush the entire city guard without much effort. That doesn't however mean that we treat the poobah with anything less than the greatest respect. Speak only when spoken to or when I signal you. Most important, no matter what I do, make no threatening gestures of any kind." He said to Itachi, "So no sharinganing and no weapons," followed by Naruto, "And since you have built-in weapons, you must do your very best to look neat. No baring of fangs or flexing of claws. It's getting later in the day, so we need to leave now and keep a low profile. A reputation is a freelance Nukanen's most valuable asset, and we have the perfect chance here to start a good rep, so no mistakes on this," Kisame said after gathering his thoughts amid the sounds of grudging agreement on all sides despite mild annoyance. Gazing at a crude illustration of their Mark's estate and the guard movements they had seen, Sasuke and Kabuto gazed. "So, Sasuke. Sama, any new ideas? Is there any kind of genjutsu we could use on the guards that we could later lift without anyone noticing?" "Well, yes, but we need the whole household to be under its influence, and we don't know how many are inside. Not only that, but we're not sure how a genjutsu placed over an area that's saturated with genjutsu traps might be altered. Can we even be sure that the mark is in the house? That will require some reconnaissance, so assuming everything goes according to what we have as far as a plan goes, what's our time frame?" I would estimate 3 to 4 days, Kabuto said, scratching his head. Crap, we need to move faster. I have an idea for a genjutsu that might work, but it will need to be refined. Sasuke began to nibble absently at his thumbnail. Can you be reasonably sure of the presence of both the mark and his wife given a whole day to observe? He asked. Sure enough. Sasuke. Sama. Alright then, keep your sleeping time tonight short and start observing. I'll have my genjutsu ready in 18 hours, but then I'll need to sleep for 8. That will mean that if we give ourselves 4 hours to prep and plan, we can start the operation in exactly 30 hours. Determined to get this over with quickly? Wouldn't a bit more patience be prudent? Sasuke replied, maybe, but how long would this mission have taken Kisame and Itachi? Forget sleep, I'll start observations now. Vincent was neither thin nor what one would describe as a fat man. He fit his chair perfectly, which was the best description the poobah had ever thought of for his physique. This was very lucky for him because he sat behind a big oak desk in his chair for the majority of the day. His many guests were seated in 8 additional chairs that were arranged in a semicircle on the opposite side of the desk. Throughout his term, he had entertained a wide range of people, but he had no idea who the guests he was about to host were while he was sitting there reading reports about changes to the city's sewer system. Come, was the knock on his door. Karen says there are people here to see you, his secretary said, hesitantly pushing the door open. Vincent was aware that Karen, the woman who worked at the desk downstairs, always provided a thorough description of visitors over the intercom, asking, and what did she say about them? There are 4 of them, but she seems mostly concerned with a large man who she says looks like he's going to eat her. They certainly sound colorful. Are they armed? No sir. For a moment, Vincent thought about sending them away, but his instinct told him against it. Furthermore, tell Karen to send them up was about as intellectually stimulating as watching ice melt in his report. He pushed his papers aside and took a clay jar and spoon out of one of his desk drawers. With a warm sigh, he dipped the spoon in, pulled out a dollop of golden syrup, and slid it into his mouth. Refreshed, he put the clay pot and spoon back in their drawer after cleaning the spoon as best he could with his mouth. Enter. He heard someone knock on his door. Well, Hoshigaki Kisame, what a pleasant and rather interesting surprise, Vincent said, his eyes tightening as the first figure pushed confidently into his office, nearly flung open his door. The poobah's seeming indifference to an S-class missing nin entering his office upset Naruto, but he also sensed a faint tension in the air. Nice to see you too, sir, Kisame said as she stepped forward. Vincent turned to face the group and said, my name is Vincent Marmite III, poobah of River City and the surrounding area. I am well acquainted with Hoshigaki, but I fear I am unfamiliar with the rest of you. He leaned back in his chair and said, somehow I knew you'd show up here someday, but I forget my manners. As the poobah scrutinized each of them with an unreadable expression, Naruto, Tamari, and Itachi took turns making their introductions as courteously as possible. The suspicion that this might be a trap has I'm sure passed through all your minds by now, so I would like to clarify exactly how I am acquainted with Hoshigaki-san, he said, resting his elbows on his desk and putting his hands together after they were finished. In actuality, neither Itachi nor Naruto had suspected a trap because they both had complete faith in Kisame. Tamari trusted Naruto because he trusted Kisame, and she trusted the Shark Man because of that. None of them corrected the poobah, though, because they were all curious. It really was, Vincent reflected, a minor event that had a huge impact. Back then I was a protester, nothing more than a punk, really, but I had a cause. The previous poobah was a true incompetent, but was the brother of a crime boss, and so remained in power for 2 full terms. He was about to be elected for a 3rd time, and I started a number of major protests and 1 or 2 riots to try and stop him. Naruto attempted to imagine the individual in front of him as an idealist upstart, but he was unable to. He continued, I had almost given up hope, but one night I found a note pinned to my door. It wasn't signed, but offered to solve my problems if I could provide safe passage to the mainland for one person and would agree to keep silent. I posted a reply note agreeing, went to bed, and woke the next day to the news that Hoshigaki Kisame, the daimyo killer, had broken into the city that night had killed the poobah. The next day I smuggled Kisame-san out of water country, and I haven't heard anything of him until today. Kisame posed the rhetorical question, how many years ago was that? I can't even remember for sure, but I was much younger. As was I, Vincent remarked nostalgically, but I doubt you are here to reminisce. We are here with regards to the incident concerning the bandit camp recently destroyed, Kisame said, hinting at Naruto with a subtle poke in the shoulder. Of course. Had I known Kisame was in the area, there would have been no doubt in my mind as to how the camp was destroyed. You shall be paid in full, Vincent said, laughing and gesturing for Naruto to stop. Kisame appeared sheepish. Actually, it was Naruto who destroyed the camp, and he did so by himself, so the money goes to him. You don't say. In that case, the reward is 400,000 yen, the same as I would have paid Hidden Mist, Vincent said, raising his eyebrows as he again examined the boy. The words, 400,000 yen? Are you sure? Nearly caused Naruto to topple over. Of course, young man. I pay based on the job, not who does it. You did a B-rank mission, so you get the money for such. Well, thank you very much, sir. Naruto leaned forward and asked, is that honey? As the poobah, in a much better mood than he had been in for a long time, picked up his clay pot once more and ate a spoonful of its delicious contents. Why yes, it is, and now that our business is concluded, I fear I must introduce myself, because although I am technically Vincent Marmite blah blah blah, my friends, and I hope I can count Kisame's friends as my friends, call me Vinny, he said with a wide smile, Vinny the Pooh. Man, that honey really is good, Naruto said, licking the palm of his hand and sucking each finger. See? Vincent said with assurance, until they try it, everyone makes fun of my honey eating. I mean seriously, you people need to try this. Tamari stated plainly, no, I'm pretty sure we don't. Bah. Suit yourself. As Naruto dug into his clay pot to find honey, Vincent remarked, oh, I almost forgot, Kisame. Zarek was here with his daughter recently, and even though it's a big city, you should watch yourself, Vincent said. Kisame looked up. Wait, Zarek is here. As in, Zarek of the Hidden Mist? As in, Zarek, swordmaster of the Hidden Mist? Yeah. Like I said, you probably don't need to worry. He wanted a list of all the high-powered shinobi in the area, then he and his daughter left. Hold on a second, Kisame said with a shiver, just being within 30 square miles of Zarek would make me worry, so being in the same city as him is a big deal. With a mouthful of honey, Naruto said, how come you care so much anyway? Allow me to be blunt. I learned swordsmanship from Haitaro Matsu, who learned swordsmanship from Ganju Sakai, and he learned swordsmanship from Ikana Zarek. Are we now getting some idea of why I'm concerned? But it's not like he's one of the 7 swordsmen or anything, so I think you're overreacting, Itachi said, crossing his arms. Kisame nodded his head. Zarek was around before the 7 swordsmen, and his daughter, Ikana Seraphim, is one of the 7 swordsmen. Not only that, as if he weren't enough of a pain on his own, Zarek uses a powerful ninjutsu sword and no one has any idea where he got it. Well, Tamari remarked, I'm concerned now. Tamari, I think we saw him, was Naruto's only thought as he remained silent. What? That old guy, at the restaurant? I think, no, I'm sure that was him. It would be far too much of a coincidence for there to be 2 old men in this city able to hide their chakra that well, and yet still have so much of it. Stunned by the sudden realization, Kisame began to pace, saying, well, this is just great. We're so screwed. I'm amazed we haven't been found out already, especially considering the first place they'd look for people like us would. His eyes were fixed on the office door, which began to slowly open. For if I were an Oscar Mayer Wioneer, everyone would be in love with me. Kabuto sang to himself while perched in a tree. Nobody was near enough to hear him, and there was only so much amusement in watching guards prowl around. Pardon me, sir, but Zarek Sama is here to see you again, said Vincent's secretary, pushing her head into the office door. Even though the poobah muttered to himself and then firmly said, tell him I'm busy. If that doesn't work, have the building's power cut, the young secretary objected to having so many sharp eyes on her. Sensing urgency, the secretary hurried back out and said, yes, sir. We have maybe 3 minutes, so everyone listen carefully, Kisame said, slamming his fist into the palm of his other hand. Seraphim will most definitely be waiting on the ground just outside the window, and we have no weapons. Ah, and whose fault is that? Itachi asked, seemingly indifferent. This is not the time to be smug, Itachi. I have to think. Thus, there was silence in the poobah's office as Kisame used his frequently underappreciated intelligence to get them out of there while a very determined, but still very polite, old man pushed his way past Karen, the door lady downstairs. Finally, got it. The proverbial light bulb appeared. Leaning her rather small sword against her shoulder, Ikana Seraphim stood impatiently beneath the central tower. It is important to note that the phrase, rather small sword, is used in a relative sense, indicating that she used a katana, which is only about 5 feet long, instead of a broadsword. She was instructed by her father to simply stand and observe the poobah's office window. Just stand and observe a window. She became the first female member of the Seven Swordsmen after training all her life and practicing until she passed out from chakra exhaustion. Additionally, her father instructed her to stand and observe a window. It was just a large piece of glass that was somehow fixed to the wall. It wasn't even a particularly interesting window, at least until it broke. Hundreds of clones poured out the window, running and jumping off in all directions, sending glass shards flying into the street. Her gaze swept over the mass, where the nearby structures precluded the use of the mass. Destructive jutsu usually employed to eliminate such a large number of clones. She saw a chakra shift as she prepared to launch her own army of clones in pursuit. She bolted after that clone, locking her senses onto it. Naruto and Tamari, who was disguised as Naruto by a henge, ran swiftly among the clones, but they were not permitted to outpace the mass of clones. "I think she took the bait, since she's coming after us," Naruto said, casting a sidelong glance. "Can I just say now that I think this plan is completely insane? Sure, if it will make you feel better, but I suggest we run faster, since she's catching up." And was it really necessary to waste chakra on all those clones? Yes, because otherwise it would have been too obvious that we were drawing her away. When they reached the edge of the city, they began jumping through trees instead of structures. But still, that may have been a bit excessive. Silently, Naruto gave in, but not because he agreed with her, but rather because he wanted to concentrate on running. As they got closer to their destination, Tamari stumbled a little and let Naruto pass her. "How nice to see you again, Kisame-san. I have to say I wasn't expecting you," said an elderly man as he approached them while leaning on his staff as Itachi and Kisame stood in the street and watched as the main door to the central tower was forced open. "Of the two of us, Zarek-sama, I can assure you I'm the more surprised," Kisame said, scratching the back of his head. "You appear to be unarmed today, but I'm more interested in how those friends of yours managed to get my daughter away from here." "Simple. I relied on the fact that you hadn't told her anything about the person or people you were after, so there was no way for her to know that there were 4 of us." "Ah, so you remembered how much I enjoy being cryptic, do you? I will never forget. You were the one who first told me that a mission is no fun when you know what's going to happen." "That may be true, but a mission is also no fun when the enemy is unarmed, so I suggest you remedy that problem quickly." "Oh, don't worry." The hands of a certain white-haired medic nin were rhythmically tapping his "When the chimes ring 5, 6 and 7, we'll be right in nth heaven. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight." Naruto grabbed Samahada and leapt as high as he could as he bounded into the campsite. Naruto was launched high above the trees when Tamari, using her fan, opened it within a nanosecond. This was no small feat of acrobatics. Holding Samahada by the hilt, like a javelin, Naruto threw the sharkskin blade as hard as he could while forcing as much chakra into his arm as he could, causing a small spurt of blood and a few veins to pop out. "Samahada," Seraphim said, looking up as the sword sailed over her head at almost supersonic speed. She twisted in midair, launching herself back the way she had come after colliding with the next branch in reverse. "So, Kisame, did you ever manage to get the feel for that backhand twist cut?" asked Zarek, who was still grinning courteously. "Nah, could never get the timing quite perfect, so I figured out a way to compensate by speeding up my backhand crosscut. Not as graceful, but equally effective." "So, I hear you saw Naruto at a restaurant," Itachi said, slowly shifting his eyes between the 2 swordsmen before focusing on Zarek. "Naruto? So that's his name. Well then, give him my compliments if you see him, because his sensory attunement is truly amazing. I'm sure he'll appreciate praise from one such as yourself." "Whoa," Kisame interrupted, "this is it. Sorry for the delay. I'm ready now," Kisame said as he ran up a wall and back, flipped off, grabbing Samahada as it flew past and landing lightly in a crouch. "Excellent. I was getting impatient," Zarek said, grabbing his wooden staff by its thick end with his hand facing the floor and flipping it so he was holding it like a sword. Am I fighting too?" Itachi blinked. As if it were clear, Zarek replied, "Kisame by herself won't keep me entertained for very long." A ripple rolled down his staff as he spoke, the wood appearing to melt into a blade. "Wait a second, you're going to fight Kisame and me with a wooden sword?" Sweating, Kisame said, "Itachi, why yes, I am. Do you have a problem with that?" "Not really, but..." Zarek was gone, and the Uchiha blinked. The earth exploded behind him as he instinctively threw himself to one side. My, and I'd heard that the Uchiha had the best eyes anywhere. "You try to keep up with me next time," he said, noticing that Zark's wooden sword was halfway embedded in the spot where he had been standing and that the elderly man himself was balanced on top. There was a flurry of movement, and Itachi managed to move out of the way once more in the nick of time. "Are you sure it's okay to leave them like that?" Tamari asked anxiously as they fled the city through the forest, now rearmed and restocked. Naruto sighed. "Well," Kisame said, "we just get in the way, and considering the opponent, I'm inclined to believe him." "But," she said, glancing at him doubtfully, "there is the small matter of the fact that I'd rather not have to fight a swordmaster of hidden mist, but Kisame said they'd be fine, and we have to trust him on that. And I'm too sexy for the leaf, too sexy for the leaf. I like pot stewed beef." Now that he was writing his own lyrics, Kabuto suddenly became aware of how hungry he was. Having grimly assessed their current circumstances, Itachi said, "Brilliant plan you came up with, Kisame." Only a few seconds had gone by when Itachi counted 3 cuts of various depths on his own body, and Kisame had received roughly the same. The two were not accustomed to this situation. Although Zarek didn't appear to possess a lot of chakra, his abilities and fighting style were completely different from anything the two Nukenin had ever encountered. The elderly man dared one of them to attack him while he stood there so innocently. The Uchiha were rapidly coming to appreciate the advantages of wooden swords, chief among them being their lightweight. Despite his skill, Itachi was certain that he would have died after the first blow if it weren't for his Sharingan. Even though Zarek was faster than Kisame and at least as fast as him, Kisame was able to block the man's surprisingly lethal wooden sword through Samahata. Itachi came to the conclusion that Zarek was roughly as skilled as both himself and Kisame put together. Zarek abruptly disappeared once more, seemingly bored by the silence, but this time Itachi was ready. He had to dodge again because his eyes could hardly keep up with the old man, but he twisted and dove right, forcing Zarek to pincer himself between Itachi and Kisame if he wanted to close for a second blow. The elderly man did so without seeming unduly alarmed. The Uchiha attempted to dodge once more, but the wooden blade sliced into his leg, leaving him with a noticeable burn. Just as Kisame exploited the gap left by Zarek's back, Itachi attempted to counterattack by shifting his weight to his other foot. Zarek, still grinning infernally, caught Itachi by the wrist and threw him over Kisame's head while bringing his sword around to parry Samahata. This knocked the shark man off balance and sent him kicking in the direction of Itachi. "And I had such high expectations for the two of you, now I'm all disappointed." Pulling himself up, Itachi shoved Kisame away from him and said, "Well, apparently this will require more planning than usual." "No shit. I don't suppose you have any brilliant ideas?" Kisame said, shaking his head to clear it. "I might just have a couple. Do you remember what I once called the most useless skill ever?" the Uchiha said, after hearing a crunch beneath his foot as he took a slow step forward. Rewind. Kisame swung his sword into a tree, barely making contact with the bark, but all of the leaves abruptly fell off and drifted slowly to the ground. Itachi gave him a stoic look and said, "So you can create vibrations? Who cares? That's the most useless skill I've ever seen." Flashback end. "Yeah, well, I want you to do it now. That building behind us first and then the street. I have no idea what you're thinking, but it has to be better than what we've been doing so far." With his gaze still fixed on Zarek, Kisame took a few measured steps backwards before slamming Samahata into the wall behind him. The entire building trembled and the windows broke quickly, beginning with the ones closest to Kisame, revealing the shockwave. Itachi ran forward as the cloud of shattered glass fell toward the ground. Curious, Zarek observed the Uchiha's movements, but as he was about to intercept, he felt a tiny scrape on his face and became motionless, realizing the trick. Clever, Uchiha, very clever. Glass kept falling, and Kisame struck the ground with his sword, causing a shockwave to travel through the ground this time. The vibrations caused the glass that had already struck the ground to fly back into the air. He kept the glass in the air by repeating this every few seconds. As he thought, Zarek let the shards fall over him. He and Itachi would both be severely limited in their movements due to the falling glass, as the faster they moved, the more damage the glass would inflict. At high speeds, the tiny pieces of glass would cut just as well as any kunai, but standing motionless was like having tiny pebbles and rocks dropped on you. Itachi continued to move forward, snatching up a few of the bigger fragments and throwing them like shuriken, making Zarek dodge as quickly as he could. "Interesting strategy, but all you've done is slow me down. How do you plan on overpowering me?" said the elderly man, who was finally beginning to enjoy himself despite the sting of another cut on his face. Itachi grabbed more of the bigger pieces and drew them closer. The ensuing barrage of blows would appear almost comical to an outsider because both fighters moved and struck excessively slowly out of concern for injuring themselves. Zarek hissed as he was slashed on the hand and hurried back. He and Itachi both had numerous minor wounds, but the swordmaster thought he was doing a little better. As Zarek was about to move forward for another battle, he looked up for a brief moment, then at Kisame before turning back to his opponent and saying, "I'm afraid I must cut our game short, fun as it was turning out to be." "And how do you plan on cutting it short? You're in almost as bad shape as me, old man," Itachi said, laughing ominously and appearing much more haggard than usual. "Your name is Itachi, right? Let me say then, Itachi, that I would most definitely like to fight you again someday." Zarek sighed and closed his eyes, focusing only on the glass as it fell and the vibrations beneath his feet as they reverberated through the ground. Zarek opened his eyes again and tossed his sword to one side of the road. He smiled disarmingly, ignoring the disbelieving looks he was getting, and said, "But today you shall learn that talent is no substitute for experience." "Leviathan!" he exclaimed, forming a single seal before raising his right arm into the air. Pain was the first sensation he experienced as his mind gradually cleared its fog of confusion. A lot of pain, actually. "What the hell?" Kisame said, forcing his eyes open. When a long, forgotten face came into view, he was able to focus despite his blurry vision. "Seraphim. Why are you here? You should be in the forest somewhere, chasing Naruto and Tamari." "Well, for one, I'm keeping a useless chunk of flesh named Kisame alive." "Where's Itachi? I remember using vibration transfer, but my memory starts to blur, and why am I all wet?" She reached down and caught him by the collar, pulling him to his sitting position. As he attempted to process everything, Kisame blinked a few times. He remained in the street, now crowded with workers, with glass and 6 inches of water on it. A few feet away, Itachi lay face down with bandages wrapped around his back. "How long was I out?" Beside him, Seraphim lowered himself and said, 30 or so minutes. "And where then exactly is your father?" "Not sure, but he left right before I arrived, cause the two of you had just begun to bleed. You know, it's strange, because based on how much my side is killing me one would think I should at least remember being injured. He used it, so your brain probably wasn't able to keep up with what was happening right before you were hit, thus causing mild memory loss." As he coughed up some blood, Kisame laughed and said, "So that was it. This is just perfect. I was witness to one of the greatest legends in mist history and can't remember a damn thing. You should just be thankful you're still breathing." "Yeah, about that. Why am I alive? I have a hard time believing you bandaged me and Itachi out of pity." "Huh? Fuck no, I would have skewered you, but my father likes strong people, and probably wouldn't like my killing someone he went out of his way to leave alive." Kisame smiled as he slowly lay back down, saying, "Nice to see that you're as charming as ever, Seraph. You think flattery will get you anywhere? Not really, but hey, why not give it a shot? I don't suppose you have any idea where my dad might have gone?" Nope. I can assume he's going to do something that I wouldn't approve of," the woman said, leaning forward and resting her head on her knees. "He went out of his way to leave right before I arrived." "Yeah, but there are so many things that fall into that category. How is it possible that you've managed to become more immature with the passage of time?" "Pure talent, babe." "What the hell?" was the sound that came from a few feet away as Itachi rolled over and shifted, wincing as his back struck the ground. Both Naruto and Tamari, who had fallen in a few times each, were soaked as they ran across the water. "Okay, whose idea was it to run across the ocean?" He fell in again after Tamari slapped him, saying, "It was your idea. We need to get to the mainland tonight. Waiting for a ferry wasn't an option," Naruto said as he pulled himself out of the water and ran up one side of a wave and down the other. "But running on water doesn't allow for any rest. A stressful enough situation, not even considering that at any given time we don't know how much longer we'll have to go. No other options were open to us. Kisame told us to get to the mainland tonight, and I intend to do that no matter what." Rewind. Kisame led Naruto to a quiet area of the office to speak quietly and quickly. "Now listen here. Zarek is way out of your league, and way out of my league, but Itachi and I together have a chance. The most you and Tamari can do for us is to lead Seraphim as far away as possible, because if she joins her father we stand no chance at all. No matter whether we win or lose this fight, the mist will be after you in full force, so escape to the mainland tonight and keep a low profile for a little while." "But that would be abandoning you," protested Naruto. "I told you, Zarek could crush you without a second thought, and I have another task for you." He thrust a piece of paper into Naruto's. 3 months from now, go to this location, it's where my brother is hiding out. If all goes well, Itachi and I will be waiting for you there. If not, I want you to tell Kirin that I went down fighting and wouldn't have had it any other way. The inference made Naruto shudder. Don't think about it, Naruto, just do it, Kisame said, ignoring him as he calmly made his way back to where the others were frantically discussing strategy. Flashback end. As Naruto ran across the water, a chilly wind blew across his face. I will not fail, he said. Zarek sat on a cliff on the shore far behind them. He could have pursued them across the ocean, he thought, but he wasn't really in a hurry. In addition, he hadn't engaged in a good chase in years. He thought for a moment about his daughter's current situation, but he also brushed it off. The experience would develop character, he thought. 13 days later. Even on the hottest days, a few people would always be moving around hidden sand, which was nothing like a bustling city. That was the case with Gaara. Not so much because he liked the heat as because he liked that nobody else did, so he could walk around the almost deserted streets. On this particular day, however, the sand boy was troubled, and his trouble was exacerbated by the fact that he was unsure of the exact cause of his troubles. He was aware that this feeling was completely illogical, yet he was powerless to stop it. He kept walking until he came to the village's eastern boundary and could see the desert beyond. He concluded it was the wind. It sent chills down his spine, but it was only a warm breeze. Something is going to happen soon, he said softly, as though he was worried about being overheard. Two people lay huddled in a sleeping bag just outside a small town that was many miles to the east of Gaara's gaze and whose name the sand boy did not even know. Since that fateful day in the water country, they had only run, eaten, and slept. Naruto felt the urge to run in his bones, but he wasn't sure what was causing him to maintain such a vicious pace. Tamari was awakened by his shifting and prodding. Time to go. How long did we sleep? Tamari yawned. 3 hours. That's not enough, it will have to be, since we need to leave. Since they were mostly dressed when they slept, it only took them 3 minutes to get ready to leave once they were awake. Ready? Naruto asked, flexing his leg muscles to relax them. Yeah. Desperate to reach the relative safety of hidden sand, they set out again, their muscles burning from lack of sleep. Zarek rubbed his hands over the spot where Kabikari Hucho had been lying just hours before as dusk was falling, saying, "Ooh, lucky. I might catch up tomorrow." Getting impatient, are we? He asked the air as he raised his head to observe the nearly unheard of sight of dark clouds gathering in the desert sky. The old man's eyes reflected a deep blue light as a flash of lightning lacerated its way to earth. I know, and to tell the truth, I'm exited as well, he said. The world was engulfed in darkness as the last of the sunlight disappeared. Excuse me, Hanzo. Sama. The Hokage sent me to get your report, Sakura said, navigating her way through stacks of bound books, scrolls, and other trinkets. From what had seemed for a few moments a solid wall of books, Hanzo emerged. Since he was the only one who could figure out how to get anywhere, Sakura vowed that his house had to use some form of genjutsu. I may have found it, Sakura-san, he said with a joyful expression. Found what? I've been refreshing my knowledge of ancient languages, and might have found a clue to the identity of the demon who subdued the village. I'm sorry, but I don't, he said, holding out a scroll that had no meaning whatsoever to her. Oh, wrong scroll. How silly of me to forget, Hanzo exclaimed with delight. See, this scroll contains information written by a group of people who used to worship demons. Blanched, Sakura said, worship demons? Yes, and it's not so crazy when you think about it. They served the demons in return for protection and power, and this symbiotic relationship continued for hundreds of years, until a young chief scorned the demon race and the people were wiped out. Now this is mostly irrelevant, but these people kept the best-known records of the different demons, along with information about them. Then why didn't you check their records before? Oh, the demon religion existed long after our assailant disappeared from history, but I hoped to find some clues in their records and I did. Sakura was able to read the second scroll that Hanzo unfurled after reaching into his robe pockets. Sakura had stopped listening as Hanzo went on about his discovery to read the scroll instead. She abruptly pointed to the scroll and said, Anubis, Keldorn, Ruksha. Oh. Here's, Kyubi? What's this name here? Levitin? Oh, no, there's some dispute among historians how to pronounce that one. He's a water demon who, every few hundred years, terrorizes ships at sea. Although we can never get all the pronunciations perfect because of the language gap, I like to call him Leviathan. Just reading the list of demonic names made Sakura shiver. So people used to worship all these demons? She asked. Yes, but that's not what's important. You probably aren't experienced enough to know this, But further down on the scroll there's instructions on how to commune with the demons, and the ritual is almost exactly the same as a summoning jutsu. So that means what exactly? Sakura asked, lost. I think that demons and summoning animals are the same thing. But then, why would we have two names for them? I'm sorry, Sakura-san, I was being imprecise. I believe they are the same type of creatures with one defining difference. What we call summoning animals become demons when they gain the ability to enter the human dimension without having to be summoned. Meaning, Hanzo raised her forehead and said, of all the things ancient civilizations tried to record, one thing was paramount: their summoning contracts. So we can find those and cross-reference them with the descriptions of that chained demon. Don't get so excited, Sakura-san. It's a relatively small discovery, but it gets us one step closer to our goal. Seraphim found herself checking in on Kisame more and more, even though she was well aware that he was immobile. There was something about the way he gazed at her while lying prone in his hospital bed, as if he had a big secret that he was keeping from her for his own entertainment. When she heard movement inside the room, she abruptly withdrew her hand from her grasp and reached for the handle of his door. Seraphim could have easily written off the nearly silent rustle as the sound of shifting blankets, but he somehow knew it was more. Stop whatever you're doing, she said, drawing her sword and kicking in the door while silently vowing to reimburse the hospital. Kisame said, hey Seraph. Wanna join me for lunch? As he raised his head from his tiny table. The shark man had a tray of nearly edible hospital food in front of him and appeared to have barely made it from his bed to the table at the side of the room. She said rather haltingly, I thought you were trying to escape. Yeah, I noticed. I don't suppose it occurred to you that people very rarely go from mangled to completely healthy over the course of 3 hours. Kisame pointed to the door that was now embedded in the wall across from where it had previously swung on its hinges. A sudden thought made him change his previous statement, adding, unless we were talking about Naruto, of course. This is going to cost a lot of money, and I'm not even getting paid for this so-called mission, said Seraphim, pulling the door from where it had landed and examining it with a dejected look. I'd like to say that I've been trying to make this whole ordeal easier for you, Kisame said, as a bite of what he had decided to be plasti.egg disappeared into his razor-filled maw. Somehow I know how you're going to finish that sentence, Seraphim said, rolling her eyes. The smirking Kisame said, I'd like to say it, but I'd be lying. You really don't change, do you, Kisame? Seraphim said quickly as she leaned against the wall and dropped into the chair across from Kisame. Her voice became airy with a forced sense of casualness. In a wry manner, the man said, not much, Seraph. I'm pretty much the same as I've always been. Blah, they actually feed you this crap? She said, reaching out and scooping up some of his mashed potato on her finger before putting it in her mouth. It's not so bad once you get used to it. This tastes like sawdust, how could you get used to it? After removing a bottle from beneath the table, Kisame said, just swish this around in your mouth for 30 seconds or so before you eat. Seraphim became pale. This is hot sauce, you wouldn't be able to taste anything after 30 seconds of swishing this around in your mouth. As he took another bite of the plasti.egg, he said, exactly. Somehow I don't think I'll ever understand you. After eating until there was nothing left on his tray that looked like food, Kisame relaxed in his chair and asked, this may seem random, but have you ever regretted teaching me? Seraphim blinked. It was arbitrary. No, really? Even when I used the skills you taught me to become a Nukenin? I trusted you to make the right decision, and so I have always had faith that for you, becoming a Nukenin was the right decision. Besides, you put fear back into the corrupt government of Water Country, so Hidden Mist might be better off this way. Looking up at the ceiling, Kisame said, better off, huh? Flashback. There was a slight chill in the air, and winter was just getting started. A young Seraphim stood in wonder at the stage that was erected in the village's central square as a light wind blew over the large crowd. She could not take her eyes off the men standing behind the Mizukage, who was giving some sort of speech. They were a new organization that represented the strength of their village and stood taller than even the Anbu. They were the Mist's 7 swordsmen. She recognized every one of their faces and had even collaborated with a few of them on missions, but they now appeared more formidable in some way, as though their status as one of the 7 swordsmen alone gave them more strength. The 7 filed off stage after the Mizukage concluded his speech and her father got up to say a few words. There was then the customary applause. As the crowd began to thin out, Seraphim moved to the small tent where her father was speaking with a couple of the 7. Seraphim stayed close to the periphery of the group, which was made up primarily of girls who had stayed behind in the hopes of meeting some of the fabled swordsmen. Instead of having to sift through fangirls to get to her father's conversation, she would have gone and joined him normally. She let her gaze wander and noticed movement close to the rear of the tent, as if someone had just ducked out. She had nothing better to do, so she ducked out and ran along the tent's outer edge until she saw a man's back and said, "Hey you." She was only encouraged by his disregard for her. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Yes, you." The man's eyebrow twitched, but Seraphim couldn't see it. It said, "Go away, woman." "Hey, you're Hoshigaki. Why are you out here? People piss me off, so I'm going to where there aren't any people," he said, turning to glare at her, giving her her first close-up view of his face. He had now succeeded in making her unhappy. "Don't be such a jackass. Next to being Mizukage, you were just given the highest honor available in the Hidden Mist, so the least you can do is be at least a little grateful." Kisame began to turn around and face her. "Grateful? That's a riot, especially coming from you. Don't think I don't know who you are, girly. You're Zarek's little princess daughter who's probably never even been in a real fight, so screw off before I get mad." Zarek was still talking inside the tent when he felt a chakra flare up that was uncannily familiar just before explosions could be heard. Kisame and Seraphim had the opportunity to share a cell that evening. Throwing a small piece of broken concrete at him, she said, "This is your fault, you know." "How could this be, in any possible way, my fault? You attacked me. You provoked me. I provoke people all the time, but most of them don't go crazy and attack me." Seraphim attempted to swing at him, but she simply fell on her face after a pain in her side flared up. Whistling, "Got you good, didn't I?" Kisame said. Weeping a little, she said, "I'll admit that you're pretty strong for a fuckwad. You're not so bad yourself, for a psychotic bitch." Seraphim laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment, but really, how did you get chosen to be one of the 7? After she managed to settle herself comfortably against the wall. "What are you talking about? I got in because I'm strong." She kicked his ankle for emphasis and took pleasure in seeing him recoil, saying, "Maybe, but your strategic skills are barely genin level. You nicked me, so what? There was an opening in your defenses. Your sword skills are near flawless, but you're open to attacks from things like," she once more kicked his ankle, "Kanai. Still, the woman who got her side sliced shouldn't be lecturing me." "I'm not lecturing, I'm just pointing out that someone as strong as you has such an easily fixable weakness, yet you don't do anything about it. If it was such an easy weakness to overcome, my teachers would have taught me by now," Kisame said with a dismissive wave of his hand. A seed of doubt had been sown in Kisame's mind even as he spoke the words, and Seraphim was thinking the same thing. For someone like Kisame to have such a glaring weakness in his defenses was really odd, especially considering how amazing all of his other abilities were. The woman kept thinking about this dilemma as she peered out the bars into the tiny cell block in the police station's basement. Shinobi remained in jail when instructed to do so in order to respect authority, even though they could have easily left if they had wanted to. This is similar to how children go to their room when instructed to do so. After realizing what had happened, she turned to face Kisame and said, "Authority." "What?" The man blinked. They made a big show of ignoring one another and stomping off in different directions when they were released from their cell the following morning, but that evening they met in a clearing just outside the village wall. It took them just a week to realize that Seraphim's darkest suspicions had been right, and they kept meeting in that manner every night. Kisame quickly fixed all the holes in his defense and overcame some of his biggest weaknesses in a very short amount of time. Every night, they trained until they were exhausted, and although the goal was to assist Kisame, Seraphim discovered that she was also honing her blade skills. They advanced from basic combat strategies to small, group and large scale strategies after a month, but Kisame still fell far short in these areas. Despite his muscular appearance, he was a sponge for knowledge and advanced more quickly than most Seraphim had ever witnessed. Following the explanation of the tactics, Kisame never once erred as they went through incredibly intricate theoretical battle scenarios of all kinds. Seraphim and Kisame had to confront what they had first talked about in that cell all those months ago as they worked more and more. Kisame's training had been faulty, and not accidentally, as was now evident. According to Seraphim, Kisame's teachers had been crippling him since he was 13 by omitting significant amounts of training that all shinobi are expected to receive. The reason for this became glaringly clear after the two trained together for 4 months. For good reason, the village's leaders were terrified of him. Just a few months prior, he was the weakest of the 7 swordsmen. On a new day close to the start of spring, he declared his intentions in front of the Mizukage. Kisame challenged the other 4 swordsmen to fight him since Zabuza and Sage, who were 5th and 6th in strength among the 7, were away on missions. The Mizukage let Kisame alone face the top 4 of the 7 swordsmen at once, reasoning that it would at least be a nice spectacle. A sizable section of the village observed as Kisame calmly and methodically destroyed them, making it truly a spectacle. Mizukage and the village council watch in horror as the top 4 shinobi in the village are publicly thrashed, blowing away over a decade of conspiracy like dust in the wind. As the battle played out, Zarek, who was not directly involved but was aware of the council's deliberate limitation of Kisame's power, watched with a sinking feeling in his stomach as his daughter grinned triumphantly. As Kisame and Seraphim began spending time together in public over the course of the following few months, rumors began to circulate. Even Zarek had to concede that, when they weren't out to murder one another, they got along well, even though they appeared to be the last 2 people on the planet to become friends, let alone more than friends. Although many questioned Seraphim's taste, everyone agreed that it would not be long before they advanced their relationship. Sadly, destiny had other ideas. This day was particularly significant for Kisame, even though the Mizukage was throwing a dinner in their honor precisely a year after the 7 swordsmen were formed. Since most shinobi had the day off, Seraphim slept until noon. She was awakened by someone yelling, "What the, Kisame? What happened to your hands?" and shaking her enthusiastically. Despite the fact that Kisame's hands were bandaged, he ignored them and stepped aside to show her something. It's called samahada. It was just finished this morning. Still drowsy, she extended her hand and jabbed her finger at the odd blade, saying, "Man, your brother is really something. This looks like one hell of a sword. I haven't really tested it out yet, but I can use it to absorb chakra. Amazing. Now let me sleep." "Fine, then, but I assume you will remember to get up in time to go to the dinner tonight?" Kisame said with a laugh as Seraphim rolled over in bed and blatantly ignored him. "I won't forget, so let me sleep or I'll hurt you." Despite his tongue out at her, Kisame grabbed samahada and walked to the door, saying, "You better get in time, or I'm going to tip you out of bed." On the slightly damp ground below, he vaulted over the railing of her apartment after slipping out the door in time to avoid a thrown pillow. As Kisame wandered around the village with his new sword, he had to constantly resist the urge to try it out on various objects. Kisame headed to one of the Junin training fields after finally deciding that he would lose his mind if he couldn't smash something. Since the field was empty, Kisame extended his arms wide and raised samahada to shoulder height with one hand while maintaining a full arm. He was going to suck in battle until he could make up for the weight difference from his old sword, which he could definitely feel. "Oi, fish. 4. Brains. You got a minute?" He heard the grass rustle behind him as he prepared to take his first swing. "That depends, Zabuza. What do you want me for?" "I'm not usually helpful, Kisame, but I figure you're the least idiotic of the people around here, so I'm going to give you a little warning," said the Devil of the Mist, shoving his hands into his pockets. "A warning about what?" Kisame asked, moving his sword from his right to his left hand. "The Mizukage received word of your new sword being finished and immediately called a special council meeting. They're in there right now discussing whether to have you assassinated in your sleep." Samahada fell from Kisame's now limp hand and hit the ground with a dull thumb. That new blade of yours does look first-rate. I can see why the Mizukage is in a panic." Zabuza gazed at the fallen sword with mild interest. "Oh, and of course, if anyone asks, we never had this conversation." With a poof, Zabuza disappeared from the training field, leaving Kisame by himself. The shark man stood motionless, his mind exerting every ounce of energy on determining his next course of action. Even he had never imagined that the council would even order his death, but Zabuza had no motive to lie to him, and now that he considered it, he wouldn't put anything past a council that had been plotting for years to keep him helpless. As the day went on, he remained motionless for nearly 3 hours before reaching down and grabbing Samahada by the hilt. "So they think they can kill me, do they?" he asked. As he raised the sharkskin blade in the air, he couldn't help but observe that the weight from before had vanished. He grinned then, and his smile gradually expanded into the evil, slightly maniacal grin that would make him famous from that moment on. "We'll see who kills who." As they headed to the dinner, Seraphim couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right with Kisame, even though he had come to pick her up at the scheduled time. His eyes appeared icy and aloof, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. Since Kisame had to go sit at the table for the 7 swordsmen and Seraphim was supposed to sit at the head table with her father, they parted ways at the dining hall entrance. Everyone in the room was a possible enemy, ready to spear him at any moment, Kisame thought as he sat and surveyed the space. Make a poke. He felt a poke in his side and looked down, nearly jumping out of his chair. He was being prodded in the side by a young girl who didn't seem to notice his nervousness. She looked up at him naively as he took hold of her arm and said, "Hello, Kisame. Sama. Zabuza took a seat across from the young girl and said, "Don't be a nuisance, Mako." "Ah, but I want to play with Kisame-san. You have to be quiet now, but I'll let you swim in the lake after, okay?" "Why? Swimming?" was Mako's distinctive 6-year-old response after giving her uncle's offer considerable thought. The Mizukage rose and began to speak. The Mizukage actually talked a lot, to the extent that it became his main skill. As he spoke, Seraphim thought about this kind of thing. She felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at Kisame. There was none of the fire that usually hid in his eyes, and they appeared icy. She decided to discuss it with him later and was about to turn away when she heard a sharp cough. A stream of milk poured from the young girl beside Kisame, covering her whole table and, consequently, the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Zabuza gave Mako a pat on the back while she coughed a few more times. "Sorry," she said, looking up at the swordsman drenched in milk after she had caught her breath. Seraphim had the impression that Kisame was moving further and further away from humanity after that day. She was the only person in the village who ever saw him, even though he had always been a recluse. He practiced with Samahada on the outskirts of the village most of the time, and when he did speak to her, he would hardly ever respond with more than 2 or 3 words. He became more and more withdrawn until the first day of spring, 15 months after they had first met, when he instructed her to meet him at midnight in the 3rd training field. She walked nervously toward the dark clearing, unsure of what to anticipate, but Kisame was merely standing in the center of the field, idly resting Samahada on his shoulder. As she came closer, he turned to face her and grinned for the first time in months, saying, "I'm glad you came, Seraph." "What are you up to, Kisame? I know you, and you're planning something big." "Don't talk, Seraphim, just listen. Tonight is the last time we're ever likely to see each other, so I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. You've been good to me, and next few days will be hard on you, but as it turns out, all I can say is sorry." "Hey wait, you can't just say something like that," and Seraphim was left alone in the field once Kisame had left. The next day, Anbu opened the door and said, "Ikana Seraphim, we are sorry to intrude, but under orders of the Mizukage, we are taking you into custody as the last known person to see Hoshigaki Kisame, who as of 27 minutes ago, is registered as a missing nin of the Hidden Mist." Finish the flashback. As Kisame kept staring at the ceiling, Seraphim began to grow agitated and was ready to call for a nurse when he abruptly snapped out of his reverie and asked, "Do you remember what I told you the last time we saw each other in Hidden Mist?" "Of course, you said you were sorry." As he looked down at her once more, Kisame said, "I hate to say this, Seraph, but I need to apologize again." "For what?" "You haven't done anything this time. In fact, you've made my father happier than he's been in ages." While she was talking, Seraphim's mind made a rather important realization. Kisame's eyes were not as focused as one might think. He was staring past her instead of at her. She turned involuntarily, and only a few nanoseconds after she had made the error, she was mesmerized by 2 blazing red spheres in a suddenly darkened room. Kisame leapt from his chair and snapped off his casts as she fell in a heap. "Thanks, Itachi. Let's roll. Did we really have to delay our escape by 6 days?" "Yeah, I had some things that I had to ask," Itachi noted calmly. "This woman makes you unusually emotional." As he put on his shirt, Kisame admitted, "That's true. She causes me to act irrationally and against my better judgment, even to the point of postponing our escape." He took a moment to put on his shoes before saying, "She makes me lose my cool and leaves my emotions in a mess. Put succinctly, she completely screws me up." After taking a moment to admire his fully clothed body in the mirror, Kisame strode past the Uchiha and toward the doorless door, saying, "And if you're really lucky, Itachi, someday you'll meet someone who will do the same for you." Naruto saw the approaching storm and realized they wouldn't make it, even though they had been running to the brink of collapse. He had no idea what exactly was pursuing them, but he was certain that they would not be able to get away from it. Or he wasn't, anyway. Grabbing Tamari's arm, he said, "Stop." "What? You almost made me fall. How far are we from Hidden Sand?" "About 8 hours, I guess." 8 hours. "The only way either of us is going to survive this is if you go on without me," Naruto said, glancing at the ground. He got a slap on the head from Tamari, who said, "I am not leaving you here just so you can be heroic. I'm not suggesting it to be heroic. I'm saying it's the only way we are going to survive. With the help of Gaara and some nin, we might stand a chance against what's after me, but not otherwise. So then what are you going to do until I get back with help?" With an easy smile, Naruto said, "I'll wait for you." "You better stay alive," she said, grabbing a handful of his hair and giving him a forceful kiss. No problem, I promise. With renewed energy, Tamari dashed into the night of the desert, and Naruto watched her leave with conflicted emotions. He had perhaps 2 hours before whatever it was reached him. Even at his most hopeful, he would have to hold his ground for 14 hours in a row because it took 8 hours to hide the sand and another 8 hours to return. Falling onto his back, he gazed at the moon. He put one hand over his eyes and said, "I'll do everything in my power to keep my word, Tamari," but Tamari decided she needed to eat something after passing through another village an hour and 10 minutes later. Even though she really wanted to keep running, she knew that without food, she would pass out. She stumbled into the ramen stand she saw first and ordered a bowl of pork ramen as quickly as it could be prepared. "Hey, mister, what's this place called?" she asked, resting her head on the counter and glancing vaguely at the man beside her. "What? This town, what's it called?" "It's called Ocean, but are you alright?" Tamari cracked a grin. "Huh. A place in the desert called Ocean, but I need to remember. An hour south of Ocean, an hour south of Ocean, an hour south of Ocean." "Miss, I really think you should go to a hospital or something," the man said, rubbing his head. When her bowl of pork ramen arrived, Tamari picked it up and walked away from the stand. "Hey, that's my bowl, and you didn't pay for the ramen," exclaimed the owner, looking shocked. "Charge it to hidden sand," Tamari said, turning to face the back. As Tamari fled, a man sat puzzled at the other end of the ramen bar. Did she not recognize him at all? Was there a plan behind her acting foolish? Was she under the influence of drugs? He thought he had one clue, but the more he thought, the more perplexed he became. "An hour south, huh? How long have you been there?" Naruto asked after opening his eyes and sitting up. Zarek grinned from 50 feet away and said, "Oh, just a couple minutes. Awfully considerate of you to let me sleep. I came all this way to fight you, Naruto-kun, not kill you." He cracked a grin, "Though I can't promise I won't." Reaching into his mind, Naruto said, "All right, bastard fox. If there was ever a time to fight your hardest, this is it," before getting to his feet. He was shocked to hear the prompt and forceful reply, "I will." The fox appeared extremely agitated. Naruto last recalls him acting this vivaciously during his battle with Gaara. "Impossible," he said, his hand suddenly clenching around the handle of Seraphim. "I hope you won't mind, Naruto-kun, if I start off at full power." Zarek threw his staff aside and made a single seal. "And by full power, I of course mean," his eyes narrowed abruptly, "Leviathan." Zarek watched in dismay as Naruto battled the waves of blue energy as chakra exploded outward, saying, "I may have vastly overestimated you, Naruto-kun, if you can't even stand up to a little raw chakra." Zarek sighed in frustration, pulled out a kunai, and disappeared in a flash, emerging behind the boy and guiding it toward his skull. The sound of metal clattering on metal startled the elderly man. A vortex of crimson chakra engulfed the boy, and the old man was abruptly blown back, digging his feet into the sand. "Don't fuck with me, old man," Naruto said, staring at him with unholy fire in his eyes. That kind of pitiful strength would never have defeated Itachi and Kisame. Zarek looked delighted. "Wonderful, Naruto-kun. I had no idea how much fun this would be. I guess now you're going to show me your full power," the boy said in a demonic tone. "Very difficult. If I didn't have a few tricks up my sleeve, I wouldn't be much of a shinobi, but then again, I wouldn't be much of a swordsman without one, would I?" After he said this, he rolled up his right sleeve to reveal a complicated tattoo that appeared to be condensed on the blue chakra. The tattoo glowed bright red, and a puff of smoke appeared, which blew away almost instantly to reveal the biggest sword Naruto had ever seen. Therefore, he responded appropriately, saying, "Damn, that's a big sword. It's called Gakuru, and I haven't used it in combat for 7 years now, so this is quite an event for me." "You didn't harm Itachi and Kisame with that?" "I didn't have to. You have picked the ideal battlefield to confront me on, Naruto-kun, whether you meant to or not." "What do you mean?" "Leviathan can control water, so with his help it's easy to surround my feet with an inch-thick bubble that allows me to move at 3 or 4 times my normal speed, but here..." Naruto laughed. "No water, and any you did accumulate on your feet would be sucked up by the sand." As he hefted the enormous bastard sword, Zarek remarked, "So it would appear that our speeds are now almost even." Although Naruto was aware that he was still slower, he had gained some confidence. Zarek was not unbeatable, and based on the way the red and blue chakra vortexes were rubbing against one another, the old man's chakra capacity was roughly equal to his own. At that moment, with the old man's eyes closed and him looking rather out of it, it seemed like a pretty good time to attack. Unfortunately, The boy knew that he was far less skilled than the others, so if he was going to hold out, he would have to attack hard, fast, and when Zarek least expected it. Leaping forward, he shifted his hand grip to a cross-cut upward. With one eye open, Zarek said, "Foolish." He brought the huge blade down more quickly than Naruto would have imagined, so quickly that Naruto could hardly follow its trail, only to become even more perplexed when he finally saw it. The sword, despite its size, was moving so quickly that it would finish swinging before he reached the strike zone, meaning it would miss him. Naruto was in a state of bliss before realizing that an opponent of this level was unlikely to make such a mistake. Dark light pulsed in Zarek's one open eye, which narrowed to a slit. Kamaitachi. Naruto was unable to even consider avoiding the shockwave, so he ran straight into it and was flung backward, hitting a sand dune with a dull crunch. Pulling himself out of the sand, Naruto said, "Well, that wasn't a very good idea, and with a name like Gakuru, I wasn't even thinking." Zarek continued to smile. To define it, Gakuru is a stretch of turbulent water in a river or the sea caused by one current flowing into or across another current. In other words, Naruto said, coughing and spat out some blood, a riptide. Sitting on a hillside, Sasuke and Kabuto gazed at their surroundings with a dejected expression. "So even after all our hard work, we find ourselves unable to proceed," the medic. Nin said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "How frustrating. We'll find the entrance soon, all it takes is a little patience." Perhaps Itachi misidentified the place. On the opposite side of the hill, perhaps. "It's worth a look, I guess." The two pushed themselves up and walked around the dirt and rock mound. "Damn. It's so bright out here," Deidara said as she stepped hesitantly into the sunlight as the ground where they had been sitting opened up a minute later. "Because Sasori forced me to search for him, I'm going to kill him." The secret door closed without a sound, leaving no sign of its existence, and Deidara, mumbling curses, set off for the nearby village to find the puppet user. Even more disheartened, Sasuke and Kabuto went back to their starting point. Sasuke was resisting the impulse to start hurling fire justice, saying, "There was no sign of anything on the other side, and I doubt Itachi would make a mistake like that anyway, but I still don't see a door here." "Well, if we wait here, someone will have to use the door eventually, and we'll be here when they do." After 0.30 seconds, "I'm bored. Shut up, Kabuto. This is a concept. Why don't we simply blow up the hill?" "Allow me to rephrase. Shut up or I'll gut you. I believe Sasuke. Sama needs to relax a little. It can't be enjoyable to be that stiff all the time. Sasuke. Sama. When Sasuke. Sama is upbeat and optimistic, I like him the most. For heaven's sake. Don't do that once more. Don't start what? Don't call me Sasuke. Sama. Why, Sasuke.sa." When they heard a twig snap, Sasuke had just succeeded in wrapping his hands around the scrawny medic Nin's neck after diving at him. They were in a position that would have been awkward if they weren't so tense when Sasuke pushed Kabuto into a bush and dove in after him. "We're an hour late for the fucking meeting," Deidara yelled as she strode up the hill, pulling Sasori along with her. "Where have you been for so long?" "I was shopping, and the store was having a special today," said the enormous figure that was Sasori, holding a plastic bag full of boxes. A free special edition Goku was given to the first 600 people in line. Dragon Ball Z action figures are not as important as top-secret Akatsuki meetings. That's just your opinion. No, it's the way things are. Kabuto and Sasuke watched the two Akatsuki go by in the bush before entering the huge hole that had just appeared in the ground. They leapt to their feet and ran to investigate the area where an opening had just appeared as soon as the ER closed. Whistling softly, Sasuke said, "The seam is flawless. There is a door here, but not even my Sharingan can see it." When Kabuto's leg struck an object, he stooped to retrieve it, saying, "Hey. That guy dropped one of his figures." "Really? Which one?" Sasuke asked with a hint of interest. "It's a special edition Goku figure." "Oh crap," came out of Sasuke's mind as the earth opened up once more. Five sat in a room that was dark. It is possible to wonder why the Akatsuki always felt the need to meet in secret in dimly lit rooms. The leader believed that the darkness made the secret meetings seem even more secret, even though it wasn't like they didn't know one another and they were 50 feet underground. There were currently only 5 people sitting in a dark room feeling rather silly because 2 members had not yet shown up. Deidara suddenly rushed into the room and exclaimed, "We have a problem." "Report," said Garm, the Akatsuki's leader, looking up sharply. "I was returning with Sasori from the village and we saw these 2 guys feeling each other up in a bush. But ignored them cause we wanted to get back but once We got inside. Sasori noticed that his special edition Goku figure was missing, and he went back outside and saw the two guys with his figure and thought they stole it, even though they really just found it on the ground. And it also turns out that they have Akatsuki cloaks and weren't just two guys feeling each other up in a bush, because I'm pretty sure one of them is a Uchiha, but Sasori is trying to kill them while raving about people stealing his Goku action figures. Garm was battling an approaching migraine, and the other two teams were staring at Deidara inquisitively. After calming Sasori and giving him back his figure, Sasuke and Kabuto had to confront the Akatsuki. "Why is it so dark in here?" the Uchiha asked, looking around the room. "That's not important," Garm said, coughing into his hand. "I've been informed that Kisame and Itachi's mission was successful, but you still need to tell me how you accomplished it." "Well," Sasuke started, "I had to alter a special genjutsu because I knew there was no way we could enter the Mark's house without setting off any traps. As Kabuto and I entered the grounds, the alarms went off, as we had anticipated. For a long time, we were able to avoid the guards, but when they finally caught us, I had to use my newly acquired jutsu." Flashback. They were cornered in the hallway by 4 guards who yelled, "Stop." With a composed expression, Sasuke waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, we're not the intruders you're looking for." One guard turned to the others as the other's eyes glazed over and said, "These aren't the intruders we're looking for. You're starting to suspect this alarm is just a diversion so the lady of the house can kill her husband," said Sasuke, waving his hand once more. "I'm beginning to suspect this alarm is just a diversion so the mistress can kill her husband," said another guard, nodding wisely to his fellows. A third wave of the hand was made, followed by the words, "The rest of you agree." "We agree." The other 3 guards nodded. "You never saw us here." One last wave of the hand. As they ran around the corner and down the hall, Sasuke and Kabuto nodded in unison. "We never saw you here." "What were we talking about, again?" the first guard asked, blinking at his friends. Finish the flashback. After that, Sasuke went on, "It was just a matter of doing it a few times, then locating the housewife and using genjutsu on her to make her believe her husband was a malevolent space alien attempting to extract her brain. We get away, his wife takes the blame, and he dies. Bing, boom, bang, and bing." With a chin stroking motion reserved for malevolent geniuses, Garm said, "Well, I'll let you join for the time being since Itachi approved of you and the mission outcome wasn't too bad. I anticipate a 100% success rate in getting you to stay a member. Although we have replacements, we still plan to meet to discuss how to replace AWOL Team 1. They're the fortunate ones who get to show our newest members around the compound because Deidara and Sasori made us all wait for an hour to begin a meeting that we no longer need." Dismissed. After everyone left the dark secret meeting room, Sasuke and Kabuto waited for Deidara and Sasori to begin their tour because they had no idea where to go. Sasori hung back to follow them as the blonde simply stomped past them. Thus, their small group proceeded through the winding corridors until they arrived at a door. "This is the cloakroom," Deidara declared as she kicked open the door. "All of the Akatsuki cloaks you could ever desire are available here. You may want to modify yours, guys." When Kabuto contemplated doing so, Sasuke shook his head and said, "No thanks, I'll keep this one." "Strange. Your brother used to say the same thing," Sasori said, lowering his gaze. "The only person among us who never changed his cloak was him." "Really? I guess there are some similarities between him and me." Putting on a fresh cloak, Deidara exclaimed, "Resemblances? I wouldn't be able to tell the two of you apart if you were taller, ate Pocky all the time, and were a little more jackass. Let's proceed to the following room now. This is the cool hat room, which has both regular hats and hats with little white dangling things, which make you look more mysterious but also make it kind of hard to see," said Sasori, who was the one closest to the door, as he led them down the hall to another door and slid it open. "Being able to see is a small price to pay for looking this good." Kabuto wore one of the white, dangling thing hats, as if he were in heaven. "At last, someone who recognizes the value of stylish hats." Deidara nodded. "Sasori claims they're stupid all the time." Sasuke glanced up at the Sand Nin with curiosity, ignoring the room of hats. "That's a puppet, right?" he asked. "Yeah. So, to really make eye contact with you, I'd have to look at your chest or neck. I suppose. Doesn't it feel weird to have people always looking above your eye level when talking to you?" It had never disturbed Sasori in all the years he had spent inside a puppet, until then. "No," he said with a modicum of conviction. Sasuke simply shrugged and said, "Whatever you say." The final item they saw during their hour-long tour was the room they would be staying in. Their beds were bunks. Sasuke took Sasori's arm and motioned for him to stay as the two elder Akatsuki were ready to depart. After Deidara left, Uchiha shut the door and forced himself to be calm. Now I know this might be an odd question, Sasori-san, but I must ask, he said. Deidara, your partner. Despite spending the last hour together, I am unable to determine whether Deidara is a girl or a boy. Even for a medic nin like me, I couldn't tell at all, sighed Kabuto. Sasori walked over to a big stool and sat down. I've been struggling with this question for years, he said. When I refer to him, she never tries to correct me, regardless of the gender I use. I've recently developed the practice of using a different gender for each pronoun. As far as I'm aware, nobody knows Deidara's gender. Since he performs physical exams on all new hires, Garm may have figured it out, but he is keeping it a secret. With a nervous expression, Sasuke said, physical examinations? Such as torture resistance testing and so forth. No, more akin to a physical examination where you have to stick out your tongue and say, ah. In order to identify his subordinates' vulnerabilities in the event of a revolt, he enjoys getting to know their bodies. Still, how can you share a room with someone and not know what gender they are? Many would ask how Deidara can stand to room with a guy who lives in a puppet. Touché. Kabuto stretched out on his bed. You can try to spy on Deidara in the shower if you want, but no one has ever managed to see him naked, said Sasori as he got up and walked to the door. However, don't forget to get some rest if you do attempt to spy on her. You'll put in a lot of effort tomorrow. Getting into his bunk, Sasuke said, thank you for the tour. Welcome to the Akatsuki, the Sand Nin said, laughing as he left the room. I'll be curious to see if you runts make it through your first mission. The Uchiha smirked as he looked up at the ceiling as the door closed behind him. You bet your big puppet ass we will, he said. Zarek watched Naruto with something akin to amusement as the boy circled him slowly. Zarek had thwarted numerous attack runs, all using the Kamaitachi, and Naruto just kept getting blasted back. The old man walked sideways over the sand, keeping in rhythm with Naruto's circling. Do you know what the problem is with shinobi today, Naruto-kun? The boy was focusing his attention on regenerating a part of his arm that had been slashed, but wasn't going to waste an opportunity to stall for time. No, what? None of the young people today have any respect for power, since none of them had to earn it. All the kiddies rely on their blood limits these days, or in your case, a demon. Naruto glanced at his arm. It was 40% healed. What about you then? You use demonic energy too, and even have a tenkin. Wrong. Naruto-kun. I worked harder than anyone growing up. When other students in my dojo trained 5 hours, I trained 10. At 16, I designed and hand-forged Gakuru, which by the way isn't a tenkin, but an ordinary sword that uses some simple principles of physics. By 20 I had designed a new type of summoning tattoo so I would always have my sword on hand. The boy looked again at his arm, which was now almost fully healed. So what? When I was 31, I was an elite guard for a merchant ship. Our vessel was attacked by a sea demon, and I beat the bastard with nothing more than a sword and my wits. Naruto paused for a moment. I guess I have to give you that one. Beating a demon is pretty damned impressive, but that was a long time ago and the world has changed. Oh really? If you think you can beat me using your borrowed power, I dare you to try. Naruto gritted his teeth in frustration. His arm was healed, but Zarek was holding back, obviously mocking him. None of his usual strategies were going to work, since he had to assume that with his experience, Zarek knew everything Kisame had taught him and most of the things Itachi had taught him. Naruto supposed that the old man's comments about borrowed power might not have been that far off, since to win he would have to improvise. He ran through a mental list of all the jutsus he knew, and something resembling an idea started to form. Naruto might have a chance if he could attack while the old man was still overconfident, but Zarek had been using the Kamaitachi almost exclusively up until this point, and that wasn't likely to last. While the old man whistled absently, the boy paused to remove his shoes. He threw the boots aside, digging his feet into the sand and making sure he had good traction. Alright, geezer, get ready to eat your words. As Naruto launched what seemed to be yet another blind frontal attack, Zarek yawned dismissively. Gakuru sliced through the atmosphere. Daikamaitachi. Alright, Naruto-kun, let's step it up a notch. The wind ripped across the desert, kicking up a cloud of sand, but Zarek heard no impact, suggesting Naruto had avoided the blast. The boy was nowhere to be seen, and the old man looked around the deserted landscape. Then he heard it. His teeth twitched at the high-pitched whine, which was nearly inaudible. Clones of swords exploded from the cloud of dust and surrounded him from all sides. In total, Zarek counted 4, 6, 8, and 9 swords. The old man found it interesting that he could replicate his thrown sword and control the demon's flight thanks to its chakra. As Gakuru gained momentum steadily, Zarek began to rotate it over his head, passing the blade from hand to hand. When it was up to speed, he twirled the sword like a baton around his body. A miniature sandstorm surrounded him as the wind kicked up sand. The second, third, fourth, and fifth sword clones swiftly followed the first Seirei Karite clone, which was vaporized upon coming into contact with this cyclonic barrier of wind and chakra. He felt the sands beneath him change as his focus moved to the sixth blade. A hand appeared out of the desert as the sixth clone was being exiled, and Zarek saw an orb of chakra being hurled in the direction of his nose. Half of Gyakuryu's blade was embedded in the sand when the old man brought Gyakuryu down and destroyed the cage bunshin, dissolving the Rasengan. His sword was immobilized, 3 spinning blades hammering down on him. Excellent work, Naruto. Excellent work, in fact. Kachiyose no jutsu, he said, slamming his left hand into the desert. With a muted poof, the last 3 sword clones disappeared, and Naruto, who was hiding in a dune a few hundred feet away, felt a chill go down his spine as a huge cloud of smoke filled his field of vision. A huge snake-like shape raised its head into the desert sky as the smoke gradually cleared. Even Manda was insignificant in comparison to the monster that was now staring at Naruto's hiding place after he had confronted Orochimaru's enormous serpents. What is this, Zarek? Have you become so weak that even with my chakra, you cannot defeat a child? Oh, shut up, Leviathan. It's not like you had anything better to do today. I'll have you know that I was in the middle of a very nice dream about mermaids. You interrupted my mermaid dream. You can dream about mermaids any day, but how often do you get to face another of your own kind? Have you gone senile, old man? We're in a fucking desert. How many sea serpents do you know who hang out in deserts? All I see is a brat hiding in a pile of sand. Not a sea serpent, you dumbass, a demon. The brat hiding in the pile of sand is a demon? Generally, I expect demons to be more than 5 feet tall, and scarier than mozzarella cheese, and I have seen cheese way scarier than that runt. Despite the imminent danger to his life, Naruto wanted to correct the demon by stating that he was at least 5.5 feet tall. However, he concluded that in order to fully benefit from the argument between Zarek and Leviathan, he would need to restrain himself. Hey, bastard fox. Got any ideas? I have one, but... Yeah, I was thinking that too, but there's a pretty good chance that I'll die in the process, so I am really not a fan of that strategy. Well, fighting as you are now guarantees that you'll die. Zarek may have become a softie in his old age, but Leviathan will kill you without a second thought. Or even a first thought, for that matter. So I have no choice then, not really, unless you want to fall on your knees and beg for forgiveness, which is always an option. Alright, then, here goes nothing, Naruto said, looking up. He recalled both the day he had used this jutsu for the first time and its 37 seals. 15 seals had been completed by the time Zarek realized Naruto was actually working on something. 30 seals had been completed by the time Zarek was able to convince Leviathan that Naruto was in fact working on something. The last seal was finished when the serpent lunged forward, aiming to devour the boy in a single bite. Shikifujin Kai, Naruto said, drawing a line of blood across his abdomen. Shit was his last thought. I had forgotten how painful this was. Tamari was having a great time skimming the sands. Having arrived at the village in 7 hours, she was now traveling at high speed on a sand platform with Gaara and a group of sand Anbu after only 10 minutes of turning around. She was still worried about what they might discover, even though the trip she had initially estimated would take 16 hours would only take slightly more than half that time. Even though they were still far away, Gaara abruptly stabbed her in the shoulder and said, "Look." She did, and the light nearly blinded her. A portion of the desert was still far away, but it was reflecting light like a mirror, making anyone who looked at it blind. Tamari exclaimed abruptly, "Go faster." When they got there, everyone disembarked like zombies as Gaara lowered his sand platform. Stuttering uncontrollably, the Anbu commander said, "Impossible, not even." Despite his fearful gaze, the sandboy shook his head and said, "No, even I couldn't do a thing like this." There was a square mile of glass in the middle of the desert. Knowing exactly what kind of power would be required for such a thing, and the only way that power could have been released, Tamari simply stared, ignoring the others. Naruto did it. That bastard broke the seal. The head of the Anbu replied, "Highly unlikely, Tamari. Sama. Humans can't handle a third this much chakra." Anyone who ran this kind of energy through their body would be completely incinerated from the inside out. Listen to me, Tamari, you have to explain everything that's happened, Gaara said, grabbing his sister's arm to keep himself from squeezing the Anbu leader. It doesn't matter if he's dead, Gaara, she said, shaking him off. We don't know that. What the hell are you talking about? The sand was liquefied for a quarter mile in every direction and all that power came from inside Naruto. Not even he could survive that. Gaara was at a loss for words. But he would be fooling himself if he thought Naruto was unbeatable. He turned to the Anbu and said, search the area for this Zarek. If he is found I want him brought to hidden sand immediately. I'm going to take Tamari back now, the rest of you can run. He took Tamari's arm once more, steered her away from the Anbu, and then raised the two of them off the ground to make their way as quickly as possible back to the hidden sand. Naruto detected a scent. It was a distinct scent, unlike any other in the world, and it had not tickled his nose in a very long time. He was unable to see anything and questioned whether his nose was playing tricks on him, but it had never been off before. I smell instant ramen. Pork variety. With chicken stock used instead of water, a little soy sauce added, chives, paprika, horseradish, and a dollop of sour cream on top. It's almost done. I hadn't planned on your coming around so fast. Naruto would recognize the muffled voice if he were hearing it underwater. Aruka. Sensei. This is a surprise. It must be my unlucky day, he said. Hardly. You should be dead right now. It occurred to Naruto that the last thing he remembered doing was unsealing the demonic chakra in his stomach. Maybe you have a point there. How did my fight with Zarek end up, anyway? I can't say I even know who you're talking about. I just found you in a field of viscous liquid sand suffering from what's honestly the worst case of chakra burns I've ever seen. Weird. Nothing on my body hurts. That's because your body was so badly damaged that you don't have any feeling in most of it. Then why can I hear, smell and talk? There are virtually no chakra pathways in your ears, tongue and nose. I didn't know that. Is the ramen done yet? Not quite. Your sight should be coming back pretty quickly, and the rest of your body should regain feeling within an hour or so. Cool. What have you been up to recently? Pretty much just hunting you, actually. I headed for hidden sand right after the mess in Konoha, and have been traveling around the country of wind ever since. I figured out that there are only 3 main towns directly between the borders of wind country and hidden sand, so I've been patrolling from one to another in hopes of running across your trail. You people never give up, do you? The village did, I didn't. I've been using my vacation time to go after you. If Tsunade found out, she'd have my hide. So how did you find me anyway? I saw Tamari in ocean an hour north. She was all rattled up and mumbling directions. I followed them, and found you. Wait. How long was I out? Half a day, so 11 or 12 hours. Phew. I still have another couple hours. How far are we from where you found me? Just an hour. We're in ocean again, and I just found an abandoned warehouse and set up a camp stove. Suddenly realizing that he could now see blurs, Naruto turned to face Aruka and said, an excellent segue to my next statement. Is the ramen done yet? Yes, actually. Pork ramen with chicken stock instead of water, a little soy sauce, chives, paprika, horseradish, and a dollop of sour cream on top. Just the way you like it. Wait. Making my favorite kind of ramen. You want something from me, don't you? Well, I'd like you to renounce everything you've done. Come back to the village, apologize to the Hokage and pay your debt to society. Or, you could think of this as a ramen to celebrate the fact that you haven't gotten yourself killed yet. You know, Aruka, I don't remember you being this cynical. Things have changed a little since the last time we met. That's true, at least. He extended his arm as Aruka. Blob extended his ramen. Blob. His vision now sharp enough to differentiate his hand from his body. Do I have it yet? Naruto asked, slowly closing his hand around the intangible object. A bit more. There, Naruto simply tipped his head back and drank the entire cup of ramen that he was now holding, saying, "Ah, that was good. You do realize that I spent nearly 10 minutes making that for you. I was hungry, and I really can't use chopsticks right now. Are you seeing better? A little, still just shapes, though." Unbeknownst to Naruto, Aruka removed his mask, found a cigarette in his pocket, lit it on his camp stove, and said, "You know something, Naruto? I've spent more time than I want to admit thinking about what I was going to say to you when I finally found you, but now that I'm here, none of it seems appropriate. We've talked 1,000 times, so why would you need to plan it this time? Put like that, I have to admit it was pretty stupid of me. I'm not going far for a while, so tell me what's going on in Konoha." You mean apart from all the madness that you caused? Asked Aruka, blowing a cloud of smoke into the air. I deserve that, but Itachi wasn't about to let his brother get killed, and the only time anyone got hurt is when you attacked us. I don't understand you. Sasuke broke the law. Not only that, his leaving was the catalyst that made you run away. Yes, Sasuke broke the law, but the law is wrong. And yes, his leaving was one of the factors that drove me to run away, but running away turned out really well for me. How can you enjoy living this way? Spending every day afraid. Afraid? Who am I supposed to be afraid of? You? The other leaf hunters? You're sent on missions by superiors. Sometimes those missions will almost assuredly end in death, but you are forced to do it anyway. I, on the other hand, do only missions I want to. Why should I be afraid? It's frightening to be alone, though. As a Nukenin, you don't have a village to support you when you're in trouble. Ah, your logic fails again. Sasuke was a Nukenin, and when he was in trouble other Nukenins supported him. Not only that, his few supporters took on your entire village and won by a landslide. Do you really like being a Nukenin that much? You never miss anything about Konoha? Was one of Aruka's criticisms of his argument's flaws. I used to be a lot more polarized about it, but I've come to accept that there are a lot of people in the village I hate, but there are as many that I'm indifferent to and a few I actually like. The thing is that I'm not willing to put up with the people I hate just to be in the presence of a few people I like. I still can't see that being a good enough reason to just abandon your village. Aruka, you and I agree on a lot of things, but not this, so let's just not talk about this, okay? I originally asked you how things were in Konoha. Really, they're pretty much the same. Neji trains constantly in hopes of beating you someday. Choji eats a lot. Shikamaru whines, etc., etc., etc. There must be something. Aruka sent a second smoke cloud into the air. Well, I was only there for a little while, but after you and your demon pal tore up the city, Sakura started spending all her spare time in the archives. It took her a day and a half to learn more about demonology than any other shinobi in the village save Hanzo himself, and she shows no signs of slowing. I really didn't want to hear about her, you know. In fact, I would have rather you talked about that ugly old fruit stand lady who used to make me pay 5 times market price than talk about Sakura. You really have some issues with her. After giving it some thought, Naruto said, maybe a couple. You didn't part on very good terms, but of everyone in Konoha, she's spent more time thinking and worrying about you than anyone else. That won't work. I've perfected the art of apathy. Nothing you say can make me care. Sakura was depressed for weeks after you left. Don't care. She cried herself to sleep every night. Hear that? It's the sound of me not caring. Naruto was beginning to feel guilty in spite of his words. She forgave you. What? Was Naruto's intended clever response, but he bit it back. Aruka allowed himself a victorious smile, saying, you heard me. I've had a lot of discussions with many people about you, and Sakura is the only one who told me that she couldn't hold what you had done against you. The boy was still unable to see that well. The few emotional weaknesses in his armor were now being pierced by the guilt. Damn it. You've made me care. I've always been good at that, though you were pretty predictable. More importantly, though, is what you're going to do now. Now you want me to do something. I want you to at least consider what you could do for Sakura, Aruka said, pressing the cigarette stub to the ground. Part of being a man is paying recompense for your mistakes. If I promise to think about it, will you make me more ramen? Sounds like a fair deal to me, but you better seriously think and not just stare off into space. After considering it for a mere 30 seconds, Naruto became disinterested and resolved to give it more thought at a later time. He stared off into space for the next 9.5 minutes. Although Aruka saw the boy's lack of focus almost instantly, she reasoned that he had at least started the process. Once the different toppings were added, he assisted Naruto in getting the second cup of ramen into his mouth. Once more, everything vanished in a single swallow. I'll think even more for a third cup of, no. Stingy. Yes I am, but I don't see you paying for any of this. I could if you wanted. That would make a great story in Konoha too. How you found Naruto but let him go because he bribed you. I'll bet that goes over real well with Tsunade. I'm hoping beyond hope that no one in Konoha ever finds out about any of this. That's probably a good philosophy, even if we both know it's really unlikely. Searching for another cigarette, Aruka said, yeah well, a guy can dream. You know that smoking is bad for you, right? Yes I do, he replied while lighting up. As you may recall, we used to have a monthly, no smoking day, in class where we'd spend 15 minutes talking about exactly how bad this is for your health. So how did you get hooked, then? Needed a stress reliever. By swatting the cigarette to the ground, Naruto said, "There are other ways to relieve stress. Get a girlfriend or something." I was never very good with women, Naruto, and even less so since I joined the Hunter.nin. I walk down the street and all the girls just stare at me. Wait. You think it's bad when they stare? That means they dig you. Come again. You heard me. Listen, Naruto. I am much older and much more experienced than you, and I can tell you that women stare at me because they think I'm weird. I can see it in their eyes. I'll make you a bet, how about that? I need to get a message to Tamari, so if I win the bet then you have to go leave a note where I fought Zarek and mark it with something obvious so that they'll know I'm alright. If you win, then I'll go peacefully back to Konoha with you and do all the things you want me to. Repent or whatever. Give me the terms. Aruka said eagerly, nearly toppling over. I'm not going into an unreasonable bet. Now I'm trusting you here, so you better play fair. I want you to go outside into a market or somewhere and introduce yourself to the best looking woman you see who's not either married or too far out of your age bracket. I'm going to bet that as long as you really try to be nice and all, you'll have a date within 10 minutes. That's absurd. But you're serious about coming back home if you lose? Completely serious. Aruka ran now, excited, and disappeared outside. 13 minutes later. In a weird sort of daze, Aruka staggered back into the warehouse and said, "What did you want that sign to say, again? I have to hurry because I'm going to coffee with a woman named Roxanne. Blonde, brunette or redhead? Redhead. Ooh, how old? 2 years younger than me. Care to make another bet? I'd be willing to accept the same terms as the previous bet, only if you lose this time you have to give me your wallet. I can think of all kinds of things we could bet on." Only half listening, Aruka said, "I don't think so, Naruto. Don't forget that you're a Hunter.nin, so when dealing with girls you need to dazzle them with stories of your battles." Finding a big wooden board, the older man said, "Lecture later, message now. I'll just carve it right into the wood. Better hurry, you have an hour to travel both ways." With her younger brother a few steps behind her, Tamari sat on the top of the tallest building in the hidden sand and gazed out over the desert. She could have passed off her time with Naruto as a grandiose dream if it weren't for the master's fan on the roof at her feet. Nothing had changed when she was back in the hidden sand. When she woke up the following day, she could immediately resume her previous status and role as a genin. Even though it was all due to Gaara's influence, she had grown accustomed to the erratic and unpredictable life of an outlaw, so it was shocking to be suddenly thrust into normalcy. For a brief moment, she contemplated burying her fan deep in the desert and attempting to completely forget that Naruto had ever existed. She began to cry, though, as reality set in. There was no wailing, sobbing, or moaning, and the tears weren't the kind of exaggerated ones one might anticipate. She simply stood there while tiny tears silently trickled down her cheeks and onto the tile roof. Gaara wanted to say something, but his sister's suffering would make any words of comfort seem pitifully inconsequential. Turning his head away, he said quietly, "I'm sure Kankuro will be glad to see you." "Yes. And all your old friends. We should invite them over or something." He received no answer, but Gaara assumed it was a yes and vanished into the sand, leaving Tamari by herself on her rooftop. Almost dancing into the warehouse, Aruka exclaimed, "That was great. Roxanne wants to see me again." Naruto was standing inside, staring at his image in one of the building's few intact windows. As the older man walked in, he looked over and said, "You forget to mention this one small detail." Their eyes were level. Aruka looked up. "I didn't notice. It's hard to judge height when someone is laying down and I wasn't really paying attention, though I did notice that your limbs were out of proportion." Naruto surveyed his body uncomfortably, and although the changes were similar in nature to the first time he had used the Shikifujin Kai, the effects were much more pronounced. He had grown slightly taller again, and running his tongue over his fangs determined that they had again grown longer, but it took only a few more seconds of poking and prodding to reveal that his skeletal structure had become distinctly more canine. He noticed that his back was hunching a little, and he had a hunch that he could run on all fours if he allowed himself to fall forward. All of his muscles had become leaner and stringier, his shoulders fell off, and his arms had gotten longer relative to the rest of his body, all of which added to this suspicion. "Oi, Aruka. Dogs have disconnected shoulder bones, right? Yeah, running on all fours requires a wider range of motion, so having disconnected shoulder bones gives them more flexibility, a longer stride when running and lets them jump farther. You sure know a lot. I used to be a school teacher. They paid me to be smart. Right now they're paying you to kill me, and you haven't done that yet. I'm better at being smart than I am at killing." "Not really, you're just not quite used to it yet. Wait until you're desperate enough and I bet you'll find you have a great talent for killing." Everyone does. And you call me cynical? I call them as I see them. How much money do you have? Why? Aruka asked, suddenly suspicious. Because I need to go clothes shopping. Dully replied Naruto, again. There seems to be some greater power obsessed with wrecking my clothes and or wrecking my body in an effort to force me to constantly buy new garments. Stop looking at me that way. Do you have the money or not? I guess. Excellent, now give me a hand here, since I really can't move very well yet. Zarek carefully inspected his wounds while leaning against a dune. After examining the situation closely for 15 minutes, he came to one conclusion. He was messed up. Leviathan had a split lip that hurt like hell, a snapped wrist, a broken foot, and at least 3 broken ribs, but his big girth protected him from most of the chakra. He always carried a soldier pill because he lacked the luxury of regeneration like Naruto and Leviathan, but he still had to bandage his ribs and make a splint for his foot. He pressed his right hand onto the blade and watched it disappear after deciding he didn't need the extra weight after looking down at Gakuru. Gamakichi and his friend Usagi the bunny were joyfully hopping down a riverbank somewhere in another dimension. What was that? He asked, looking around quickly after hearing an odd poofing sound. I don't, Usagi said, shrugging her little bunny shoulders. Splat Gamakichi stared in wide-eyed horror at the large sword now lying on the ground where Usagi had just been. And the splatter of red that was now Usagi. Ah. Zarek thought about his arm. What he used to seal his sword was essentially a reversed summoning contract, so he couldn't help but wonder where exactly the weapon went when he wasn't using it. However, that was a question for a different time. He grunted in agony and began searching through his pockets for his soldier pill. Wearing clothes that truly fit him, Naruto pushed his way out of the clothes store with joy. It's crucial to wear clothes that fit because it's never fun to wear underwear that's 3 sizes too small. Aruka was beginning to look irritated at the rapidly diminishing stack of bills in his wallet, and he didn't particularly mind going barefoot for a while, even though his shoes had been lost somewhere in the desert. How are you feeling? I can barely walk, Aruka. How does it look like I'm doing? You really need to be more positive about things. Being able to move is an amazing feat for someone with your level of injuries. Amazing or not, it's still not enough. I'm helpless without my chakra. Naruto. I could cut off your arms and gouge out your eyes and you would still be a lot more dangerous than most shinobi I know. True. And by the way, I'm assuming I can abandon any hope of ever getting my money back, the boy said, causing Aruka's eye to twitch. Yeah, pretty much. They continued talking as they walked back to the warehouse because Aruka was genuinely unsure of what to do next. When they got there, Naruto immediately fell back asleep. Somehow, he felt himself drawn back into the waking world, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a big dog licking his face. Naruto shoved the mud away from him, reached into Aruka's pack, and took out an energy bar. He unwrapped it and tossed it to the dog. There, now leave me alone. After jumping and catching the bar in its mouth, the dog appeared to find it satisfying and ran out of the warehouse after barking once. Though he was still unable to detect even the slightest hint of chakra, Naruto felt much better and saw no sign of Aruka anywhere. He was happy to discover that the majority of his major muscle groups responded fairly well to a brief test. The burning feeling was still there, but it was unlikely to go away until his chakra system began to mend itself. It was unsettling to consider that he had burns on the inside of his organs and muscles. The fact that his regeneration would be severely slowed was even more annoying. He saw that it was a bit of a vicious cycle. In order to use any chakra, he had to regenerate his pathways, which in turn required chakra regeneration. He sighed as he stretched his arms and put on his new vest to see how much range of motion his new shoulder muscles truly gave him. To his astonishment, he was able to maintain his arms straight and in line with his torso by rotating them like windmill blades. After being relaxed, he began practicing some fundamental taijutsu techniques in an attempt to become familiar with his new body. Occasionally, a sharp pain would shoot through one of his arms or legs, causing him to flinch, but he refused to let it stop him. He took a break after about 20 minutes and began heating some water to make instant ramen. As he lost himself in the mesmerizing bubbling and watched the water begin to boil, sweat trickled down his face. By the time he poured it over his cooked noodles, a good deal of the water had evaporated, though he couldn't tell how long it had been. He walked out of the warehouse, slurping loudly, and began to explore the surrounding streets. He paused as he rounded a corner and noticed a smaller man with oily hair surrounded by a group of rather large men. Is there a problem, gentlemen? Naruto, who was still eating his ramen, was the center of attention right away. Get out of here, brat. We're just doing a little business. After gulping down more noodles, Naruto pointed to the smaller, shivering man nearby and said, "It looks like you're being a little rough. This is none of your concern, so just walk away." A few of the bigger men began to move toward the boy when he made no move to do so. As they moved to encircle him, he watched them come closer but extended a hand. Naruto tipped his head back and drank the remainder of his ramen, tossing the cup aside, saying, "Wait a second. Okay, I'm ready." Without even changing his expression, Naruto grabbed the thug's hand and crushed it as one of the men reached for his arm. The other men were a little less certain now that their companion was lying screaming on the ground. "What the hell do you want, kid? Money?" said the leader, who Naruto assumed was the largest and most mean-looking. "I just want to know what's going on, and why you appear to be ganging up on someone obviously weaker than you. I'm only telling you one more time, leave." Naruto sighed as he dodged a punch from one of the thugs who had gotten behind him. The thugs grabbed Naruto's wrist and threw him into a nearby trash pile. Two more attempted to flank him, but Naruto used his favorite move of all time, the scissor kick, to flatten them. "What is it with you people and resorting to violence? All I do is go for a walk, and the next thing I know, people are attacking me. I'm injured, you know." Now, those who could were fleeing as quickly as they could, leaving Naruto encircled by a group of thugs who were either unconscious or wailing pitifully. Whatever, he shrugged to himself and carried on with his stroll. Sakura sank into a chair and looked at the paper covering her kitchen table. Since she was the only one who cared, she received her mail every day along with all of the correspondence addressed to the Uchiha estate. She sorted everything to one side each day and checked it once a week. This week's amount was unusually high, but she thought the majority was junk mail. Her suspicions were largely validated until she came across a seemingly innocent-looking letter that caused her to pause. The words, "Are you Uchiha Itachi? If so, then do we have some deals for you?" were scrawled on the front of the envelope. She ripped it open, thinking it must be a practical joke, and took out one sheet of paper, which unfolded to reveal a formal letter. "Greetings, Uchiha Itachi. We are aware of how busy 19-year-old life can be, especially when you're putting in a lot of effort as a shinobi. Although eating healthily may not always be simple, we have some fantastic offers on Pocky, and even Pocky for after dinner if you want to lose a few pounds. Feel free to contact one of our representatives at 555 Fat Gone, which is 555.328.4663, if any of this sounds good to you." Sakura hurried out the door after reading the letter one last time to make sure she wasn't going crazy. "Tsunade is not going to believe this. Did you go out today?" Aruka asked Naruto, who was performing one-finger push-ups when she returned. Yeah. Why? There's a big story going around. Apparently there's a water shortage in the city, and most of the water supply is controlled by a guy named Crisco, who's backed by the local gangs. Now a group of cops went undercover 6 months ago to bust this guy, and managed to get hired as his bodyguards. The direction of this didn't sit well with Naruto. Now they were only few people in a large group of bodyguards, and today was the first day that his detail consisted of all undercover cops. They managed to get him away from the rest of his organization and were interrogating him, but just before they got him to roll. When Aruka simply left it hanging, Naruto turned over and said, "Well shit. So I take you were one who beat up the police?" "It would seem so, but I didn't know they were police at the time. Their cover was blown as soon as they confronted Crisco, so now they're screwed. They must have evidence against this guy if they followed him around all that time." "Yes, but he escaped from the police and is now holed up in his fortress of a house, surrounded by minions, and sitting on top of a tank filled with water that the city needs to survive." Ouch. And once Crisco found the name of the man who had led the undercover team, he had his daughter kidnapped. And he had all the puppies and kittens in the city gathered together up and is hanging them over a pot of boiling water, threatening to drop them in. "Okay, so I made that last one up, but the thing about the daughter is real?" "As far as I know." Naruto sighed, "Fuck. If this Crisco was just a greedy asshole, I could let it slide, but since he plays dirty I'm going to have to something about it." "What exactly are you going to do? Kill the bastard?" Just like that. Just like that. What about the girl?" After giving it some thought, Naruto said, "I'll leave that to you." As Naruto left the building, Aruka stood dumbfounded and yelled, "Wait a second," before running after him. It was easy to locate Crisco's mansion because it was essentially the biggest structure in the city. In addition to that, there were about 100 police officers outside. With ease, he leapt over the wall, moved to the open front door, and took a quick look inside. There were several of the men he recognized from this morning, Chief among them the man Naruto had nicknamed Head Thug, standing close to the door in a police uniform, looking extremely anxious. The greasy-haired man Naruto had defended this morning was at the bottom of a flight of stairs across the enormous entry hall, flanked by a small army of tough-looking men who were fully armed. A few more police officers were present, but they appeared utterly terrified. Those who knew Naruto widened their eyes as he strode in. "Oi, you the one whose daughter was kidnapped?" he said, turning to face the large police officer from this morning. "What the fuck do you care? This is all your fault anyway," said the man, who seemed to be making a concerted effort to control himself. Looking across the room, Naruto rubbed his head and said, "Okay, not getting anything from you. You there, Crisco? Did you kidnap this guy's daughter?" he asked. Yeah. Are you threatening her life? That is the point of holding someone hostage, isn't it? Alright then, I guess I have no choice. You police guys might want to get out of the way for this." Naruto wandered slowly in the direction of Crisco and his friends while the rest of the room stared at him. Crisco grumbled, "Listen boy, I'm grateful for your help this morning, and will pay you well, but stay back and let me deal with this first." Shaking his head, Naruto proceeded to advance, saying, "I'm afraid that won't be happening." As some of the gang members raised their crossbows, Crisco asked, "What do you mean by that?" while raising a hand. With narrowed eyes, the boy said, "I think you know exactly what I mean." "Well, go ahead and attack me then, but you'll find I have some very good protection," snorted the oily-haired man. With a flourish, he snapped his fingers, and smoke billowed out as a trap door opened in the floor, causing the ground to rumble. A rose emerged from the smoke. A platform that is empty. After a moment of everyone staring at it, a flushing sound came from somewhere in the building. Through one of the second-floor doors, a young man dressed in shinobi jumped over the railing onto the platform and said, "Sorry, I was just in the..." Pointing, Crisco said, "Fight him." He glanced at Naruto. "Whoa. I actually have someone to fight today. I may not look like much, but I almost passed the Chunin exam a couple years back, and I won't go easy on you." "Exactly how low are your standards around here?" asked Naruto, staring blankly. "Don't insult me." Each of the three bunchins, which the young man formed, drew a kunai and launched an all-out attack on Naruto. In pity, he watched them rush at him and said, "Well, let's hope you get lucky." "Lucky?" The three boys chuckled. First to the left, Naruto ducked the kunai thrust and used his hand to grab the boy by the neck. A half-second later, he grabbed his neck once more after blocking a thrust from the right. The third strike came directly in front of him, and he dodged the last kunai before sinking his teeth into his attacker's throat. "What do you know, your luck was good today," he said, holding the trembling boy in the air with his right hand as the forms in his left hand and teeth vanished into smoke. With trembling eyes, he glanced down at Naruto's teeth and said, "You really didn't know which was the real me?" When Naruto smiled, the boy passed out. "Anything else?" he asked, casually dropping him and looking at Crisco. "All of you, kill him," said the greasy man, who appeared insane. More out of self-preservation than loyalty, the frightened gang members pulled out throwing weapons of all kinds and threw them at Naruto. Naruto blurred and disappeared just as the weapons were about to strike him. "Above," said Crisco, looking around frantically. The first row of thugs were eliminated by weapons they had thrown themselves just seconds earlier, so it was much too late. Naruto twisted in midair and landed his hands and feet on the ceiling, using his claws to dig in and stick to it. "Really, Crisco? When you hire mindless minions, make sure they have good aim." The police had to move aside as the crowd pushed its way out the front door, and Crisco's men were now scrambling as quickly as they could for the exits. The greasy man was left with his few devoted followers after the mass exodus was over. "You may kill me, Runt, but that police man's daughter is going to die with me. She's probably being strangled to death in the basement even as we speak." "Do you have her, Aruka?" Naruto said as he fell from the ceiling, twisting once more to land lightly on his feet. Holding a small girl, the hunter.nin emerged just outside the door and said, "I have her and the guards have been dealt with." With a look of insanity in his eyes as his remaining men abandoned him, Crisco exclaimed, Ha 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 ha. "So you think you can kill me, do you? Then we'll all die together, how about that? I was going to use this on the water tank as a last resort, but it should work just as well to kill you," he said, taking a stick of dynamite from his pocket. The madman waved the stick in the air and said, "Take this," as everyone outside watched in tension. Naruto saw the explosive fall toward him end over end after Crisco threw it. He kicked one into the air after looking down at the kunai strewn all over the floor. After taking a closer look at the falling TNT, he grabbed the kunai and threw it with a slight wrist flick. With an untraceable speed, the weapon flew through the air and sunk with a wet thunk into Crisco's head. Naruto caught the dynamite after it turned over and over a few more times. The boy's gaze shifted to the middle of the room, where a tiny fragment of wick was burning and slowly floating to the floor. He observed it for a few more seconds before it silently extinguished itself. Boom. After dropping the dynamite, Naruto left the mansion through the front door. As Naruto walked by, he paused to see how the young girl and her father were doing. "You can't know how much I appreciate this," he said, looking up. "Give my regards to the guys I busted up, and consider us even." Aruka and Naruto then disappeared. One cop became interested and approached to look at the stick of dynamite while the majority of the officers were apprehending Crisco's former gang. The man's gaze then followed the kunai in Crisco's head and the tiny wick fragment on the floor in the center of the room, where the wick had been neatly cut off half an inch above the top of the stick. "Sir, you'll want to see this. There are no words to describe how nervous I was back there," Aruka said, collapsing against a wall as they returned to their warehouse. "About the mission. I was worrying about what would happen if I was caught taking an action like this without orders. Be content that you did some good today, Aruka. So after this, how long are you planning on staying in the city?" Naruto nodded. "Not long at all. Probably going to leave tomorrow morning. Why, are you planning on following me? I have to return to Konoha soon, and tomorrow is as good a time as any. So tonight is our last chance to hang out, huh?" "Yes, it is, and you are going to do some talking." "About what?" "You've been sick, so I've been doing all the talking, and now I want to hear about you a little bit." "There's nothing really to say about me. If you need help, start with Tamari and go from there. From the impression I get, you two are getting pretty close." Aruka merely grinned as Naruto choked and began to cough violently. Aruka woke up the following morning to the aroma of ramen. Naruto had prepared 10 cups of instant noodles, 2 for Aruka and 8 for himself, because he felt he owed Aruka breakfast. In actuality, he had only cooked the ramen because he had originally taken it from Aruka's pack, but that was a small matter. "I'm surprised you're still here, Naruto. I would have thought you would have left as soon as you got up. Don't you have all kinds of important things to do?" "I'm going to dig my sword out of the desert today, and I'm not really looking forward to it, so I'm procrastinating." "You do realize that it's probably under the section of desert now covered by glass? Hence the procrastination, but I want to get to hidden sand as soon as possible, and before I can do that I have to settle the score with an old man, which requires my sword. You're going to go back and fight the same guy who kicked your ass last time, but this time without chakra. I'm kind of hoping that my chakra pathways will heal before I find him." Aruka said, "Great plan you have there," after finishing his breakfast and discreetly taking a cigarette out of his pocket. "I like to improvise, but are you any good at it?" Aruka was thrown a scroll by Naruto, who rolled his eyes and said, "Here you are, oh great master of sarcasm. Something for Sakura." "I'm amazed, Naruto. What is it?" "None of your business, so just give it to her." "It's not going to explode when she opens it, right?" Aruka asked him, giving him a flat look. "No, release a poisonous gas? No, start playing music from the Katamari Damacy soundtrack? God no, I would never do something that inhumane. Is it going to do anything that might get her or me in trouble?" "Nope. 100 safe, I guarantee it. I'm trusting you on this, so if anyone gets hurt because of this scroll. I'm not a very good person by most people's standards, but I don't lie, and I would never even consider being so underhanded as to try and hurt the village through you. We clear?" Aruka glanced at the floor and said, "I apologize." "Don't be." Naruto simply assisted Aruka in getting ready to leave after saying something that was a pretty good conversation starter. Although neither of them was working particularly quickly, everything appeared to be finished much too soon. "In the big picture, you haven't been gone that long, Naruto, but somewhere along the line you leaned some maturity," Aruka said, raising his pack onto his back. "Nah, I'm just really good at faking it," the two of them said as they walked out into the street and turned right at random. "If you say so, but I see maturity. Anyway, are you sure you don't want to hang around a bit longer and help me dig through a few hundred metric tons of sand?" "No, I think my life can go on quite happily without my ever having to dig through any sand at all. And I figure it's better if we keep our time together short. We live in different worlds now." "Maybe. But yesterday, you felt a little rush, didn't you?" "A rush? Play dumb if you want, but you know you did the right thing yesterday, and you did it without being ordered to by anyone." Tell me you didn't enjoy it even a little bit when you beat those thugs away from that little girl." When Aruka realized his mouth would not open to deny it, there was a heavy silence. "See? I'm not going to suggest you leave the village or anything, but stand up to your superiors once in a while. It will keep them on their toes." "So now you're promoting insubordination? It's part of a long-term plan to force hidden villages to reconsider how they operate. And how do you plan to get support for this mass coup of yours?" "Under my organizational structure, all shinobi will be given a 15-minute donut break twice a day. What if they're in the middle of a battle? It won't matter, because if I get all the villages to operate this way, both sides will take their breaks at the same time." "What kind of donuts? Chocolate sprinkle? Vive la revolution." "What? Sorry, historical reference. Look it up." "I need to head the other way pretty soon, but I have something I want you to say to the Hokage for me when she inevitably finds out about our meeting, and you have to use the exact wording." "Sure. What do you want me to say?" "Tell her that I have no problem doing missions for Konoha again, on one condition." "What's the condition?" With a smile, Naruto said, "That she pays the same price as everyone else." "She's going to kill me." Aruka gulped. After stopping his progress and beginning to turn around, Naruto had the epiphany: it would be even better if Kakashi was in the room too. "As a matter of detail, what is your price? You don't seriously think the Hokage would hire a missing nin from her own village, do you?" If she were desperate enough. It had never crossed Naruto's mind that his joke might be taken seriously, so he had to think for a minute. 2 million yen. "So I'll see you later then, Naruto?" Aruka said, initially objecting to the price but putting the information away for a time when he might need it. The child chuckled. "I'm sure we'll run across each other again eventually. Take care of yourself, sensei." After that, they parted ways and neither of them turned around. Unaware that he had a text in his pocket that would forever alter the study of demons because it contained all of Naruto's knowledge about the demon race's past, Aruka would travel to Konoha without giving the scroll any thought at all. Zark's stomach rumbled noisily as he staggered through town. Like Naruto, he had only a few thousand yen left after losing the majority of his belongings to the shifting sands. As he contemplated this conundrum, he noticed a group of youths performing what looked like dancing in the street. After a few minutes, 2 people would stop dancing and more money would be exchanged, and he watched as money changed hands. "Hey, you kids over there, can I try?" Zark recognized a competition even though he had never heard that kind of music or understood what kind of dancing it was. The boys snickered, but one of them raised his hand and said, "Sure, old man, I'll take you on." "What odds?" The same boy was muttering when someone whispered, 20 to 1. "I'll bet 9,000 yen on myself, then," the elderly man said after tallying his money. A few brave individuals wagered for Zark to win, usually because their friends dared them to, but full-fledged laughter broke out. Someone turned on the boombox, and the elderly man sat down opposite the arrogant teenager. After 7 minutes. "Remember, kiddies, never underestimate a geezer," Zark said as he left a trail of open mouths and a crushed ego in his wake, carrying a big bag of cash. 2 boys standing close to the crowd's edge observed the elderly man leave. "Dude, did that guy just do a disco to rap music?" "Uh-huh. I didn't know that was rhythmically doable." "Me neither. It was a damn good dance, wasn't it?" "Yep. Think he'd teach us the disco?" Naruto looked glumly around the glass field. He hadn't really noticed the glass field that had spontaneously formed from his uncontrolled chakra because he had been unconscious the last time he was here. It was large. Enormous. As in, Zark's sword was rather large. He would obviously need to reconsider his strategy of conducting methodical excavations in the desert. He would have to use the mush between his ears a little if he wanted to locate his sword. So he took a seat and thought. What was his knowledge of glass? There was no assistance there because, despite being a liquid in theory, it functioned as a solid in practice. Although glass had the appearance of a crystal, it was actually amorphous, meaning that its atoms lacked structure and order. From an atomic perspective, it was more like cotton candy than anything crystalline. Even though this fact was intriguing, Naruto was unable to see how it could be applied. Then his thoughts drifted to something Kisame had taught him one night by the campfire, and it had to do with resonance. Every substance vibrates at a particular frequency, with the resonant length being the lowest. Kisame had informed him that the glass would shatter on its own if a vibration were produced that was very close to, but not precisely, that frequency. In practice, this effect was a lot of fun, even though it was dull in theory. After all, when a scientist says that glass shakes itself apart, what he really means is that it shatters violently, and Naruto needed to do just that. How on earth did Kisame learn something like that? That you, bastard fox? The voice said, causing Naruto to stumble and fall onto his back. Are there any other dashingly handsome demons currently forced to cohabitate with you inside your head? Cause if there are, I'd love to meet them. It gets lonely in here. See, I knew it was you. Why did you ask? So I would have time to collect myself after the surprise of having you talk after being quiet for so long. I'm more surprised than you are, brat. I've been trying and failing to get your attention for a couple days, and I went to some pretty extreme lengths. I had a really weird dream last night, and it included you singing Candy Girl. The result was awkwardness. So you really were singing Candy Girl? I thought you might be just ignoring me, so I tried to come up with the most annoying thing I could think of. You were right. I didn't sleep very well at all last night. Back to my initial question. How does Kisame know about something like resonance? He has many hobbies, one of which is science that involves breaking shit. I'm just quoting what he told me one day, but anyway, on to more important things. I don't suppose you would be so lucky as to have any space in which to manifest? I don't, but even if I did, you can't give me anywhere near enough chakra in the pathetic state you're in right now. You could have stopped after saying that you didn't have any space. I could have, but I derive great pleasure from pointing out your insufficiencies. If you can't manifest, we really will have to use vibrations. I can oscillate my body with a very small amount of chakra, but I'm not sure how accurate I can be in controlling the frequency. How much chakra are we talking here? As of now I have pretty much none. If you have enough to maintain a connection with me, I can probably draw enough to shake things up a bit, even if you can't feel it. Naruto concentrated hard and sensed what might have been the slightest trace of chakra, but he would have to rely on the Kyuubi to deliver this. That was a strangely unsettling thought. Naruto sighed in resignation, lay down on the glass, pressed his ear against it, and slowly moved one claw in gentle circles across the glass surface. Naruto listened intently and quickly identified the frequency he required despite the complex and overtone-filled sound that was produced. Oi, bastard, can you hear that? The Kyuubi could actually hear it after losing himself in the boy's thoughts, and he began to hum loudly in an attempt to match the pitch. Deep within the glass desert, Sakura began to tremble as soon as the demon had it and drew on the smallest bit of chakra. After some time, the Kyuubi finally got it just right, and when he did, Naruto leapt away and put his hands over his ears as the glass reverberated, greatly intensifying the sound and transforming the desert into a gigantic speaker. He wasn't sure how long he could tolerate it, but the Kyuubi changed the frequency by a very small amount in a matter of seconds. A portion of the glass desert broke 300 feet from Naruto's position, sending the sword flying. When it landed and skittered across the ground, the boy sprinted forward, picked it up, and slid to a stop. Hey Fox, remind me to pick up some sodium if we ever come across a place that sells it. Why? For Kisame, we owe him one. It's pretty much his favorite stuff on the planet, but Itachi won't let him keep it around. What would he want with a lump metal? Sodium ignites upon contact with water. Like, makes a little fire, ignites, or explodes, ignites. A half-pound of sodium dropped in water can level a small building, assuming you have enough water, Naruto said, leaning his blade comfortably against his shoulder. We definitely need some of that stuff. We can get some for our own personal use too, then, the boy said with a laugh. Naruto paused to admire Aruka's sign before making his way back to Ocean. He felt better after seeing Tamari for what seemed like much longer than the few days it had actually been, even though it was just a wooden board with a simple message letting her know he was okay. At that moment, a part of him wanted to just run until he collapsed at her feet, all the way to hidden sand. However, Naruto couldn't abandon their battle because he could sense in his bones that Zarek was still close by. Controlling his emotions, Naruto embarked on another journey across the desert. Tamari tried to lift her spirits by leaning in and looking around the room. She had gradually forgotten more and more about her former life during her time with Naruto, but it nearly made her smile to see everyone she had known growing up together. An hour or so ago, Gaara had brought everyone together, and they had all waited for her calmly, talking among themselves and remaining silent despite the fact that many of them could feel her hovering just outside the door. When she finally plucked up the courage to open the door and enter, she was instantly overwhelmed. Everyone in the room seemed to want nothing more than to help her recover from what many described as her terrifying ordeal. Some were content with a simple handshake, but many insisted on hugs. She mainly just nodded to whatever they said and took the unadulterated sympathy that everyone seemed to be displaying, since it quickly became clear that nobody in Hidden Sand had the slightest idea of what she had actually been doing all this time. Until she reached Bando, that is. Despite the fact that she had known Bando her entire life and he wasn't a bad guy, He lacked some tact. Glad to see you, Tem. Guess it was a stroke of luck that bum who was holding you got whacked, huh? He said, giving her a solid thump on the back as she went by. As Tamari tensed and her chakra flared, the atmosphere changed visibly. Bando began to back away slowly, but Tamari's fist swung into action, sending him flying through the air and out the window. Everyone in the room was in a state of shock as they attempted to comprehend what had just transpired. Tamari was known for being physically weak, just like the majority of Sand Shinobi who used battle fans. Bando was at least 180 pounds, but by no means was he a huge man. Sending 180 pounds flying across a large room took a lot of force. Been working out a little, Tamari.san? Asked one of her former academy teachers, who chuckled softly. Astonished to discover that the haphazard act of violence actually improved her mood, the sand girl was silent for a while. Are you okay? She asked as she walked through a parting crowd to the broken window after basking in the adrenaline rush for a short while. I think I broke my leg in the fall. Can you move? No. Perfect. For the first time in days, Tamari felt energized, and as she moved away from the window and the weak whining coming through it, her step had a little more bounce. Wash goin' on. Why she fey1 though quiet? Asked Konkuro as he pushed open the kitchen door and came out with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, his stuffed mouth indicating he had already tried a few. When he saw a doctor walking by, Zarek grabbed him and said, "Hey, I need some medicine to speed the healing of broken bones." "I'm sorry sir, but I'm busy right now and..." "Is this enough?" the elderly man asked, holding out his money bag. The physician mumbled, I'm sorry sir, but we don't just hand out valuable medicine to anyone who asks." "Where's the nearest discotheque?" "The nearest what?" "The place where the young people go to dance." "Leave the hospital and turn left, go a couple blocks down, turn left on Main, go a few more blocks and it's on your left. A place called Ziggy's." Zarek released the doctor and hurried out of the hospital, saying, "Thanks." 20 minutes later, with 2 enormous sacks in hand, the elderly man returned to the hospital and said, "Okay, I have more money now. Give me the medicine." After a few moments of staring at the money sacks, the doctor drooled a little and said, "Of course, sir, right this way. We have many fine brands of product to help speed healing, and you'll be shipshape in no time. No bullshit sales pitches or fake courtesy please, doctor. Just give me the best stuff you have and I'll be on my way." Within 5 minutes, Zarek received his medication in the form of a salve, but his somewhat severe tone dampened the doctor's spirits. "Just rub that on the injured area liberally," the physician advised, "and anything broken or bruised should heal in a couple of hours tops." "Thanks, your help has been appreciated." The old man left his money sacks behind and left through the automatic doors. Naruto felt tension leave his body as he walked the streets of Ocean brandishing his sword, something he had not even noticed before. Both Kyuubi and Naruto found solace in each other's company, even though they detested one another. For Naruto, the demon was responsible for his life and the few liberties he had, while the Kyuubi was his source of power and, typically sarcastic and snide, wisdom. The boy kept wandering happily, knowing that if Zarek ever approached, he would sense his presence. The one benefit of not having any chakra flow was that no one could sense him, but normally he would never be so brazen. Even other shinobi would be unable to tell him apart from a regular man if they saw him. Or rather, a regular man with a sword big enough to cut a cow in 2, claws, fangs, and facial markings that resembled weird tribal tattoos. Even though he might not have been very discreet, they were unlikely to cross paths in a city the size of Ocean, and that was only if Zarek was present. Nevertheless, Naruto kept a tiny portion of his brain on guard in case of an attack. He didn't really know where he was going, so he let his feet lead him wherever they would, and after an hour or so, he somehow found his way to the police station. When Naruto realized his location, he quickly ducked into a side street and climbed a fire escape, trying to blend in as much as possible. After he was safely atop an office building across from the precinct, Naruto paused to try to understand what in the world had driven him to go to the one location in the city where everyone who knew him would congregate. He was unable to answer this question, but he still felt compelled. His knees nearly buckled as his entire body burned with a sharp pain as he quickly hinged into his typical disguise of Sasuke. A fact for which he was certain the Uchiha would yell at him someday. "You know, I never get tired of watching you do stupid things, not ever." Naruto slid back to the fire escape, ignoring the fox, and hid his sword in a hidden corner of the roof before descending to the ground. Since they were mainly a police clan, he had excluded the Uchiha fans who adorned Sasuke's shirts from his henge because they would likely be well known among their law enforcement counterparts. In an attempt to appear unimpaired, Naruto strolled casually to the station and pushed open one of the double doors while quickly surveying his surroundings. He was a little shocked to see that there was not the suspicion he would have expected so soon after the kidnapping of an officer's daughter. Actually, it appeared to be a little cheerful. Everyone was moving around in the lobby with a little extra bounce in their steps, everything was shiny and polished, and a janitor was singing a little ditty to himself while mopping the floor. Uncertain of what to do, Naruto approached the display cases and began looking for faces he recognized, soon locating the one he sought. Naruto had referred to this man as the head thug during their first encounter, but after seeing a photo of him in his full uniform, Naruto couldn't help but feel a little bad about using such a bold nickname. With his focus now on the nameplate, he applied the more appropriate title of Hidori Katsu. Naruto approached the receptionist, caught her eye, and said, "Hello there, I heard a friend of mine got in trouble the other day. His name is Hidori Katsu and..." With a courteous smile. "Oh, yes, his daughter. Well, I'm not supposed to tell anyone about the specifics, but you can ask him yourself. He's probably in the break room, so I'll have to page him." The receptionist grabbed a tiny microphone and said, "Officer Hidori to the front desk please. Hidori to the front desk," her voice resonating throughout the building. Naruto resisted the urge to twitch uneasily and instead chose to pace slowly back and forth until the man himself entered through one of the lobby doors. He looked at Naruto and then at the receptionist before asking, "Can I help you with something?" Trying to look friendly, Naruto said, "Hey, Katsu, it's been a while." "Do I know you, sir?" With a suspicious glance, the receptionist said, "This young man said he was a friend of yours." "You don't have to be this cold, Katsu. I thought I'd made up for the alley incident. Didn't we agree to call it even?" Naruto said as Hidori turned to deny it. The policeman's mind began to spin, and he grinned somewhat exaggeratedly, saying, "Well, you did cause a pretty big mess." A round of apprehensive laughter followed. Naruto motioned with his head for the policeman to follow him out the door as the receptionist sighed and returned to her work. As soon as they were on the street, the boy was the subject of a barrage of inquiries, beginning with, "Who on earth are you?" "See. That's a complicated question, but I'm not going to be anything but peaceful. You can't expect me to just take your word for it. What happened to gratitude? Don't get me wrong, but a lot of cops saw what you're capable of, and someone of your power just wandering around our city makes a lot of us nervous. You guys get nervous way too easily then, but I'll be gone soon. I just wanted to meet you." "You wanted to meet me?" asked Hidori, who appeared a little surprised. "Is there something strange about that? We have a few shinobi posted in the city from Hidden Sand, and they probably wouldn't even talk to me. It would break the chain of command." He chuckled, "Trust me when I say that I'm not the kind of person to worry about something like that. My only motive is curiosity, and I have no superior to report to." "So is this your real form?" "Nah, just a henge." "So that bestial form was?" "Yep, me in all my glory, but I don't want to keep you away from your work." "Oh, I wasn't working. We were actually having a little party of sorts. With Crisco gone, the crime rate is already dropping through the floor, and someone made the joke that now they'll have to lay off half the police. Would you mind if I hung out for a little while?" Naruto asked, leaning against the building's wall. "What?" Naruto was about to say, "You said you were having a party, and I could use a party right now. Just say I'm a family friend or something," but everything in his mind told him not to. "That sounds great, but you're not going to answer any more questions, are you? If you really want to know, do a little digging through your logs of missing nin." Pushing the precinct door open, Hidori said, "I was already planning on it." Waving to the rabbit, Naruto said, "Hello, Bunny.san." "Hello, Naruto. How are you today?" the tiny furry creature said as it hopped over to him. "Pretty good, though the world seems a bit blurry." "Ah, but Naruto, that's because you're drunk." "Hey, silly rabbit, I can't get drunk." "No, you are most definitely drunk. I think there might have also been something in those brownies you ate. But my chakra burns all the alcohol and other crap out of my system." Naruto blinked. "Shit," with a commanding nod, the rabbit said, "See, I told you." "So what do I do now?" "Oh, you'll just have to wait it out, and I'm afraid you'll have to do it alone. We hallucinogenic bunnies are in high demand these days." "Okay then, bye-bye. See you later, Naruto." The rabbit disappeared in a swirl of color and Naruto looked around the room. Hee. Things are spinning. Naruto ambled out of the police station, flinching as the sun hit his eyes. Man. When he said party I thought he meant a bunch of cops eating donuts and drinking coffee. "You owe me another one, brat. I maintained your henge for you when you were out of it, which was most of the night. And I'll bet you were enjoying every minute of it. Hell yes. I particularly liked the part when you danced with the stripper on the table. To his dismay, Naruto did recall saying, "You must swear to me that you will never tell Tamari." "We'll see about that. Damn it, why didn't you snap me out of it before I got in over my head?" "Bah. You need to let loose once in a while or you get all tense and act like even more of a jackass than usual. Plus, it's fun watching drunk people." After stumbling across the street, Naruto ascended to the roof where he had left his sword, saying, "I'd shoot back a clever comeback, but my head hurts too much." Naruto closed his eyes and lay down beside his sword after he was finally able to remove his henge. "I'm gonna take a little nap, okay?" he said. "You don't need my permission." Naruto fell asleep without paying much attention, daydreaming about a world in which his head didn't feel like it was breaking apart. "Fox. What the hell is going on?" Naruto exclaimed as he sprang to his feet and grabbed his blade as alarms sounded all around him. "I don't know. Everything was completely peaceful until about 5 seconds ago." The chaos backed up Kyuubi's claim as they ran to the roof's edge and peered over. Naruto followed along the rooftops as police poured out of the station and ran down the street, while everyone else was running around haphazardly with no apparent idea what was going on. "Hey! What's going on here?" Naruto exclaimed as he dropped into the street and grabbed a man who was running in the opposite direction as the police procession led him through what was starting to feel like an unsettlingly familiar area of the city. He gasped, "Some freak just ruptured Crisco's water tank. God knows how he got past the police, but he did, and now he's just standing there as the water runs onto the ground. Then why hasn't anyone stopped him? We tried, but he has this sword and..." The man began to cry. Naruto only needed to hear that. Bracing himself for another jump, he leapt with all his strength and landed on a roof half a block away. As he ripped across the rooftops toward Crisco's mansion, people turned to stare. He could see a circle of police officers encircling the house as he got closer. Those who weren't fleeing watched in horror as the water they needed to survive accumulated into a slowly expanding pool on the ground. Ignoring the water that began to drip into his shoes, Naruto landed in the courtyard of the mansion and exclaimed, "Zarek, where are you?" Dead silence, followed by a tiny splash. With a snap, Naruto turned his arm back, stopping Gakuru just an inch from his neck. He recoiled as the blade sank into his palm, saying, "That was dirty, old man. We seniors have to take every opportunity we get, Naruto." As Zarek struck out with a kunai, the boy brought Kuride to bear, and Naruto had to let go of Gakuru in order to grasp the other arm of the elderly man. Blade against blade and hand against hand, they were now in a deadlock. "How can you even hold that sword with one hand?" snarled Naruto. "Oh, I just eat my Wheaties every morning and never drink alcohol or smoke." Bull. Naruto began to overwhelm his opponent by pushing as hard as he could. As Naruto fell forward, Zarek ducked and abruptly separated. The ground he had previously occupied was ripped up as he leapt forward into a roll rather than attempting to regain his balance. As Gakuru narrowly missed him once more, Naruto instantly flipped back onto his feet and broke to one side. Zarek proceeded with a follow-up decapitation while he brought Kabikuri around for a low hamstring cut. Both of them spun, maintaining momentum for a full 360-degree spin as Naruto ducked and the old man leapt. Their blades clashed once more with a grinding sound, trapping them in a deadlock. All of this occurred in a matter of seconds, leaving the considerable number of spectators utterly stunned. Naruto, well aware of his predicament, glared up at the elderly man. Using jutsus could become very dangerous with so many people present. If one fighter used any offensive jutsu, even a low-level one, the other would have to retaliate, which would lead to escalation. Naruto, who could still only use a small amount of chakra, benefited from being forced to use only taijutsu, but it also meant that Zarek abruptly vanished, as was to be expected. Naruto needed the water to increase his speed, but he didn't think for a moment that Zarek had broken the tank to pull him out because the elderly man was too kind for that, and the man increased his speed. Naruto barely escaped with a nicked shoulder after Zarek struck him with a diagonal slash from his blind spot. Zarek launched another attack without missing a beat, choosing to use a straight cross cut. Naruto swerved and fled, narrowly escaping once more. After being stunned for a moment, the elderly man pursued. The boy had nearly reached Crisco's mansion's doors when he abruptly slammed his sword into the ground in front of him and pressed his feet against it. The blade flexed like a horizontal springboard, causing Zarek to skid to a stop as Naruto was hurled directly at him. Naruto then struck the elderly man with a flying tackle that was very shinobi-like but still very effective. As Naruto and Zarek struck the mud, Gakuru flew. The old man grabbed Naruto's shoulders and kicked him with both feet, turning him over and sending him skidding through the mud after the enormous sword. Although they were slightly battered, they were back at each other in a matter of seconds. Though he wasn't expecting to be without his sword for very long, Zarek drew 2 large kunai with little expectation that they could withstand Naruto's claws. Realizing that he had the upper hand for once, Naruto launched an offensive right away, being cautious not to move too fast and allow his opponent to get past him. No matter how quick Naruto was, if the old man went straight for his sword with him in his path, it would leave him vulnerable. There is a lot of waiting and observing when 2 swordsmen are battling, in contrast to the usual shinobi battles, which are usually swift and bloody. Waiting for the old man to move, Naruto moved slowly forward, concentrating all of his energy on Zarek. The boy saw Shark begin to shift as he was about to take his 11th step. He had to be absolutely certain, but he suspected the old man was going to turn left. He was able to see through the feint, as skillfully done as it was, as his pupils dilated. He broke right, and Shark, realizing instantly that his ruse had been discovered, made a last-ditch effort to change course without success. In their altercation, Shark lightly struck Naruto's shoulder but paid a heavy price when the boy's claws tore down his side. The old man broke away and dove for his sword, forcing Naruto to follow suit unless he wanted to use his bare hands to battle Gakuru. Naruto leapt out of the mud and landed on the house next to the now deceased Crisco's, grabbing Sakura right as he ran past. As the tank continued to slowly drain, Shark stood beneath him, unwilling to give up the water's advantage and sure that Naruto wouldn't waste any time. The boy clearly understood this, and he frantically tried to think of a strategy. He had to finish it quickly because a straight sword battle between him and Shark could take hours. He could now draw on his chakra more than the average person, but it was still only a moderate amount for someone his size. He didn't have time for a long straight taijutsu match. He was too bad at genjutsu to even attempt it, and he would lose a ninjutsu battle. It was time to use our imagination. The main issue he was dealing with was water. The more water that was taken out of the tank, the more powerful Shark became, not to mention how much it could cripple the city. In a moment of insight, the remarkably straightforward solution to this puzzle suddenly occurred to him as he was desperately trying to figure it out. He shaped a tremendous amount of chakra, Kurigakur no Jutsu, and flashed through seals with the ease of someone who had done them 1,000 times. The old man realized too late when all of the water on the ground abruptly turned to mist, and the tank burst, transforming all of the water inside as well. The house was rocked by a loud explosion. The water around his feet vaporized as well, negating his speed jutsu, and Shark felt a brief twinge of regret. He had been hoping for a little more time. Shark lifted Gakuru and charged forward, sensing that Naruto had abandoned his rooftop perch and was now pursuing him through the fog. The two slid into their respective stances after Naruto blocked his initial blow. They attacked, blocked, parried, and counterattacked in a barrage of blows that came one after the other without hesitation or delay. The slightest insecurity would result in death in this battle of wills, and neither of them faltered in the least. Shark's sweeping defensive slices were defeated by Naruto's more brazen and aggressive style. Their blades clashed repeatedly as they moved through the mist like phantoms, their movements silent. Neither would give in, even though every minute felt like a day and every second like an hour. Although it would have been simple for one of them to separate and allow the other to rest, doing so might expose the first to retreat to attack, which is a position that cannot be taken. So they went on. Gakuryu's especially strong stroke broke through the fog, allowing the two combatants to briefly see one another. Although Naruto's expression was solemn and demonstrated his undivided attention to the battle, the boy was a little alarmed to notice Shark grinning. After a brief moment of eye contact, the old man abruptly altered the battle's rhythm. He separated and launched an attack from a new direction, surprising Naruto with a thrust forward. The boy knew he couldn't block it, but he was determined to try anyway, spinning his blade at a speed he knew was much too slow. Naruto jerked as he saw the sword approach, his body suddenly ripped from his grasp. Form was kneeling in front of him, and Shark looked down at him and said, "This is foolishness, and I want no part in it." "But why? You are too weak. Your coup will fail, and my only regret is that there are people stupid enough to follow you to their deaths. We could win easily if you helped us. Everyone would rally around you. Why would I help you? Why would I help a self-proclaimed devil gain control of an entire country? I am a devil, Shark, but I'm one you helped to create. And besides, I don't care about politics and all that crap, but I care about keeping the country strong, and the scum who run things now care about nothing but their own fat useless selves. I am a shinobi of hidden mist, and I will defend it against anyone who threatens it, no matter the circumstances. As the man who had once been his best pupil stood up and turned to face him, Shark scowled and said, "All right then. I thought I taught you better than this. You are acting like a petulant child. I am going to take this country over, old man, and there will come a time when you realize I was right to do it. Get out of my sight, Momochi. You are a disgrace to me and to our sword style." Zabuza walked away. "You're right about my being weak, but I won't be weak forever. One day I'm going to make you eat those words. You think you'll ever be my equal? I doubt you'll even survive this pathetic rebellion of yours." With a sardonic smile, the mist demon stopped in the middle of his stride and said, "Then I'll strike at you from the depths of hell." Everything was silent as Gakuru struck the mud with a wet thunk. That was spectacular. Naruto.kun. A half-twist parry followed by a quick backhand slash. Tell me, do you ever remember learning a form like that? Shark sighed as he held his paralyzed and only partially attached sword arm in his other hand. No, but at the time it was just a means of stopping your sword from connecting with my skull. That defensive counterattack is the best one that I ever came up with, and I only taught it to one of my students. Shark laughed. He was never very good at it though, that fool. The elderly man winced as he squeezed his wound to try to stop the bleeding. After stroking the Seirei Kurite's hilt with his thumb, Naruto asked, "So is that it, old man?" Gakuru disappeared without a trace. "Today is your victory, Naruto.kun. Strangely enough, I don't mind the feeling of losing. Short as it was, the battle was magnificent, and I haven't enjoyed myself so much since, well, never. But you'll leave me alone now. Of course, you shall never be bothered by me again." "Good, except," with narrowed eyes, Naruto asked, "Except what? If you ever want a rematch, you know where to find me." After 3 days, a rare and valuable commodity in hidden sand, Tamari sighed as she sank into her bath. Every 3 months, citizens were supposed to take a bath, but Gaara never did, so he had let Tamari take it in his place. In fact, the past few days had been tolerable, with Bando spending nearly an hour apologizing and her peers showing her newfound respect. She even occasionally took a 5-minute or so break from thinking about Naruto. Thinking of the people who were making such an effort to lift her spirits, especially Gaara and Kankuro, who were prepared to go to sometimes absurd lengths, made her smile a little. A violent knock on the door interrupted her as she reached for the soap. "Tamari-sama. If you even think about coming in here, I'm going to tear you in half." "What do you want?" "I'm very sorry, but there seems to be some sort of disturbance at the south entrance. It seems there's a man who's been inquiring as to your location," the door said, snapping shut after it had begun to open. "Why is that a problem?" "Well, he was carrying a large sword, and one of the gate guards insisted on inspecting it." Without bothering to dry off, Tamari hurried to get dressed after standing up so quickly that she nearly fell out of the tub. Ignoring the Chunin on the other side, she threw open the door while putting on her shirt and ran straight down the hallway to the exit. She didn't know why Shark had followed her to the secret sand, but she didn't want to cause trouble for the village. Although it was only a short distance to South Gate, she had to go a few blocks away to retrieve her equipment from her room. Tamari estimated that she might only have 2 minutes, so she would need to move quickly. She plunged in headfirst through the open window of her bedroom and rolled to a stop, clutching her fan with her hand. She didn't realize there was another person in the room until she was halfway around to jump out the window again. The intruder was cornered against a building at the south gate by about 100 shinobi. She moved a few paces ahead of the group since the highest-ranking individual in attendance was a Kunoichi Anbu captain. "Who are you, and why do you insist on being senselessly violent?" "Well, actually, I just kind of enjoy senseless violence. Now I have a question," he said with a snarly smile, extending his weapon. "Don't you think this is a sexy sword?" he asked. The quiet was overwhelming. "I mean seriously, if you were to see this sword just laying at the side of the road, don't you think you'd suddenly have an incredible urge to run your hot hands over it?" As their captain's composure began to falter, the various Anbu collectively retreated a few paces. "Now, as I was saying, about your intentions here. And then you could take it home so you could grind up against it just for the sheer joy of rubbing your body against a sword as sexy as this." The poor cornered intruder was now the target of a storm of kunai, shuriken, and other sharp objects, but he seemed unfazed as a red chakra flared up and effortlessly blasted all the projectiles back. "Nice try, but not nearly good enough. Might I recommend some explosive tags next time? When Tamari's training took over, she ripped a kunai out of her holster and hurled it blindly in the direction of the room's only hiding place. Now I have to say, that wasn't the kind of welcome I was expecting. Naruto approached and flicked her forehead amusingly, saying, "You do realize that if I were someone else using a henge you'd be dead right now, right?" Her body abruptly stopped responding as the voice registered, leaving her with nothing to do but stare. "How did you get in here?" was the first thing that came to mind, despite the surreal situation. "The fox is creating a distraction of sorts, so I just hopped over the wall and found where you live. But, I'm pretty sure I have Anbu watching me." "You did, hence the distraction involving the bastard fox saying he was looking for you. It drew all your watchers and guards like Itachi to Paki." After a brief exchange of glances, Tamari gave him the strongest punch she could manage in the stomach. "Ow, I thought you were dead. How could you stay away this long and not even try to contact me?" At this point, Naruto could have explained that he had left a message and that it wasn't his fault she didn't receive it, but he chose to remain silent because it would have likely been inconsiderate and she might have hit him again. "I promised you I'd come back alive, didn't I?" "Yes, but, there are no buts when it comes to my promises. Ever. How is it that you managed to make such a blatantly arrogant statement so comforting?" Tamari asked, staring at him for a moment. "It's part of my charm. Is there any particular reason you're standing 6 feet away and avoiding looking directly at me?" Tamari asked, feeling her anger at him ebbing away despite her best efforts. "That depends, because there are 2 options here. You might have just gotten a lot more comfortable around me, but I think it's more likely that you haven't noticed yet that your clothes are completely soaked through." Tamari blinked, and rather clingy, I might add. Her ears turned red. "Not that I'm complaining, mind you," she said. "Could you turn around, please?" in a slightly strained voice. The demon posed dramatically. "No, Christy, you can't leave." He switched to a high squeaky voice, "But I must, Jack. See, I'm your sister." Back to his low dramatic voice, "No. How can this be?" An Anbu lieutenant sidled up to his commander. "At this point, sir, I think he's just mocking us." She looked over to where Kyuubi, in his usual Sasuke-ish from, was reading aloud from Ika Ika Paradise, A New Beach of Love, and then looked back at her lieutenant. "That's a very insightful observation you make there." The lieutenant grinned like an excited puppy. "Thank you. I was being sarcastic." Oh, there was a gap in conversation. Then a sob could be heard from the crowd of Sand.nin, and one of the Chunin started to get teary-eyed. "I'm sorry, but I just can't help it. It's so sad. Jack and Christy love each other, but they both know it can never be. This performance is so touching." An eyebrow started to twitch. "I am commander of the Anbu, respected by all. I am not going to lose my cool. I am not going to lose my cool. I won't. I don't care, Jack, I don't care. Even if we are siblings, I must have you," Kyuubi said in a squeaky voice. As the whole group of shinobi, including her personally trained Anbu, gasped in surprise, the commander's control nearly broke, and she began to slowly massage her temples. Naruto was sprawled on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling when Tamari, now dry, came out of her bathroom. "Making yourself at home?" With a quick glance in her direction, he said, "Yes, thank you. I'm a bit tired, since I really haven't slept for 3 days now." "What could you possibly have been doing?" Condensing a numerous square miles of mist into thousands of gallons of water. "I trust that there's a long and involved story there, but I probably couldn't give less of a damn about it right now." "That's about what I figured." Tamari pushed him aside a little, lay down, and put her head on his chest to listen to his heartbeat. Her voice lacked the vitality it usually possessed when she spoke. "I really thought you were dead. I honestly believed it after seeing the desert of glass." "I know. You beat him, right?" "Yeah, I beat him." "So what now?" With a slow exhale, Naruto said, "That depends on you." "On me? I can't stay in hidden sand for very long, so if you decide to remain here then." As Tamari squeezed Naruto's side, she interrupted, saying, "Listen, after this last mess, you'll be lucky if I let you out of my sight for a few months. Well then, we don't have to meet Itachi and Kisame for some time yet, so I'd like to visit the Country of the Wave." "Country of the Wave? Yeah, I figure we a base of operations somewhere, and Wave Country has no shinobi, it's relatively out of the way, plus I like it there, so I thought I might buy up some real estate." You're not worried about being vulnerable if we stay in one place. I intend to take safety precautions, but I'm not overly concerned. There are a lot of politicians who have far more numerous and powerful enemies than I do, and none of them have a tenth my power, yet they sleep contentedly in their own houses. You've thought this through, it seems. I've been rolling the idea around in my head for a while now. But we can stay here for tonight, right? You're not planning on going anywhere. Leaning over to give Tamari a quick kiss, Naruto laughed and rolled her off him, saying, "Tonight, I don't even plan on moving from this spot." Kankuro pushed open his front door to find his brother sitting on their couch looking strained. "Hey Gaara, what are you doing?" "Nothing. I looks like Naruto's alive." "I know." "What? How? He's upstairs." Kankuro did a little mental figuring. "And you're doing nothing?" Gaara nodded. "Absolutely nothing. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I'm thinking we should get you out of the house." "Hell, I don't think I want to be in the house." "Where would we go?" "We could go watch a demonic sword transformed into Uchiha Sasuke recite his own rendition of a porn novel in monologue." "I'm assuming this is one of those things that makes more sense when you see it." "Not really, but I kind of enjoy watching the commander of the Anbu tear out her hair." As Kankuro continued, Gaara slowly got to his feet and pushed himself out the front door, saying, "And for what it's worth, the demon is pretty good with his different voices."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.